Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 234 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and we've gotten some information to get the general idea that the Russians may be running out of cruise missiles. That is right. You heard it correctly. A lot of people have been asking for a long time, are the Russians running out of cruise missiles anytime soon? And the answer to that has always been we haven't had an actual number to work off of to know whether they were or weren't. But before we get to that important bombshell news, no pun intended, that we have today, we have to cover what's been going on with missile attacks over the past 24 hours. Starting off in Vinnytsia, where we saw another Russian cruise missile slam into a building nearby to Ukrainians. Here we can see this video right here. We see the missile flying in, and it explodes just right over beside this yard. You hear the shrapnel coming down. And that's the end of the video, and it's a pretty serious looking ordeal. Of course, like any other missile attack, it causes a decent amount of damage. But one thing that the Ukrainians have that the Russians, I guess, didn't realize is that they have the ability to fire back. And they have the ability to do the exact same thing to the Russians. But unlike the Russians, they actually fire their missiles at important targets. Let me show y'all what the Ukrainians did in response to these missile attacks in Belgorod. So let's take a look. Uh-oh. That's not good. That's not good at all. So Matthew, let's take a look at this. I think everyone in this apartment complex is going to be getting a refund on their electricity meter here in the next few days, because I don't think they'll be getting power back anytime soon.
That was like an instant blackout, like all at once.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? That was honestly insane. Like, really, the power went out before you could even see the explosion. Let's watch that one more time. Oh man, 1 second, everyone. I gotta pull up something, because this is what I imagine the Russians were thinking. So this, if I can let's see here. Let me see if I can just open the image. 1 second, I gotta go over here and try and find this real quick. Alright, so can we just take a look at it right here? Here we go. Alright, so found the one I'm looking for. The Russians, when they were firing off cruise missiles, Matthew, into Ukraine, were like, oh, this is going great. We can just strike at them. They really can't do anything. And then once Belgorod hit, the Russians looked like in that town once they realized that the Ukrainians could fire back at them.
Although, Enforcer, I can guarantee you nobody is getting a refund at all, because that doesn't happen in Russia. They don't get refunds.
No, you don't get refunds. You don't get consumer protection in Russia. That's one thing that does not exist. And in fact, speaking of this attack on the Belgorod power plant that the Ukrainians have pulled off, there is an even better video showing the missile literally slamming into the... Everyone gave me the name earlier, and I know the name. What is the name of the, like the power grid structure, Matthew, that helps to transfer the power grid from high voltage lines to medium voltage lines? I forgot the name of it.
A substation?
Yes, a substation. We can see it hitting the substation connected to the power plant right here. Ooh!
Right smack in the middle.
Of course, considering that it hit directly into the substation, probably no Russians at all were even injured or killed, but the damage to this power station and its substation that transmits the power to the rest of the city is pretty significant, one can tell.
Я говорил, что, блядь, сюда прилетит, нахуй, потому что здесь ёбаная...
We can now see... He turns the camera back into the darkness of the now blacked out apartment room, and he's like, guys, I don't think the electricity's going on anytime soon. And while it's a little unfortunate that a lot of Russians in this area will probably be without power for a while, it is funny to see that Russians, by and large, are going to start realizing that there's no such thing as an infallible and undefeatable Russian Federation. If they weren't already realizing it at this point, everyone in Belgorod, after all they've been through, they've been pretty much the brunt of Ukrainian retaliatory attacks against the Russians, like the helicopter raid on the oil silos, this attack on the power plant, among many others. The Ukrainians have hit loads of army armories that are in the area around Belgorod. I think they're getting the picture that this war isn't really one that the Russians can just steamroll through, and the Russian public is just protected by and large by this massive shield that the Russian army is. They can't protect anything. And once they attack Ukraine, Ukraine can attack them in the exact same way and a lot more effectively, because the Ukrainians, of course, don't waste their missiles attacking civilian targets. They actually attack strategic resources and infrastructure, like this substation connected to this power grid. And so with that, real quick, let me hop y'all over to something, because we actually got an infographic talking about Russia's cruise missile inventory from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Now, how accurate is this? We don't know for sure, but apparently the Ukrainians have a number of the Russian missiles that the Russians apparently have that are operational. Now, one thing I'm wondering about this graph before we go into and start breaking it down is, why are these numbers so low? The Russians have around, on paper, 8,000 nuclear weapons that they can at least account for. Whether they're operational or not is another story. And so I'm wondering if these numbers are only accounting for the operational cruise missiles they most likely have, or if this is saying that this is their entire cruise missile inventory altogether. I'm not really sure, but one thing we can see here from this graph is that the Ukrainians must be counting how many missiles the Russians have fired. And based off of this, we can assume that around 800 Iskanders have been fired, around 250 calibers have been fired, and around 200 KH-101s, which are air-launched, have also been fired towards Ukraine, leaving the Russians with only 609 left out of a total number of 1,844. So going off of this, we can see that if these numbers are correct, the Russians are starting to get towards the lower end of the amount of cruise missiles they have, and they may have to start using them very carefully, or very, I guess you could say, conservatively as the war continues on, because they've largely run out of all of their ground-launched Iskanders, and all they have left is a small myriad of sea-launched and air-launched cruise missiles like the Caliber and the KH-101. So I gotta say, pretty interesting. But before we move on from this little clip, and considering that this is the major news of the night, let's try and do some number crunching and see if this is an accurate number. So, how many Iskanders do the Russians have? And I have a feeling it's going to be a very hard thing to try and find a Iskander. Did I spell that wrong? No, I didn't. Iskander missiles do the Russians have? Because I have a feeling it's going to be hard to find an exact number on these, because missiles aren't really accounted for like aircraft. But we can see that each Iskander costs around $3 million. Quite an expensive weapon to have been. Actually, I thought, considering the design of this thing, wouldn't you assume, Matthew, that this would have been something from like the 60s or the 70s?
Probably so.
Well, interestingly enough, the Iskander went into service in 2006. I find that very hard to believe, because this thing looks like it came straight out of the 60s or the 70s with its design and how...
It does. It looks Cold War era, sort of like in design.
I wonder if we read into this, if this is an upgraded or heavily refurbished version of one of those missiles. Let's see here. Short range, destroy it to replace the Tochka. So it looks like this was made to replace the Tochka. So let's see if we have an actual number on these. Let's see here. Trying to move through this. So it looks like the Russians have 160 units, according to Wikipedia, but it doesn't look like it gives us an actual number. If they have 160 launcher units, I would assume that the number of 900 missiles would probably be accurate, because they would use these 160 units multiple times to fire off these rockets. But then again, I'm not exactly sure, because we're not getting any numbers from Wikipedia. So let's venture further, and let's see. Defense UA says here, Defense Express actually, which appears to be from Ukraine, says on, what day was this? May 6, 2022, that the Russians more than 19 have been launched on the territory of Ukraine. That's according to the Pentagon statement from April 29th. So here it's saying that they've launched more than 1,950 missiles. This infographic says that they've only launched about let's see. Let me try and do a little bit of quick math on that. About 1,200 of them. And so that does seem to line up. Wait, no. I'm sorry. I have to back up. 1,950 missiles launched versus 1,200. That isn't lining up. For some reason, I had a mental slip there. It appears that at that point, more missiles have been fired than we're seeing on this infographic. So this infographic may be inaccurate. So let's keep on going. And let's see what they say. So, let's see. Russia still has up to 50% of what it had stored before the invasion and all types of ordnance as of today. We're still trying to look. Let's see. So they said in this post there were around 900 missiles of the Iskander variant. And so we do know that this number has largely stayed accurate throughout the entire war, is that there's around 900 of these missiles out there somewhere. Let's see. There were around 900 of that type. We're going to move on. Caliber is approximately 350 units of the 500 manufactured. So going off of that, going off of what this post says from Defense UA, it appears that almost all of the calibers that they could have fired have been fired, and the inventory that they have that's still operational is going to be quite small. In fact, it's going to be a lot smaller than 272. It's most likely going to be around only about 50 to 70 more of these caliber missiles are operational and ready to be launched by ship or by submarine. And now moving down from that, it looks like, what in the world? What kind of ad was that? Anyways, let's see. Not more than a crisis. Yeah, Ukrainians should remember. So it looks like they don't cover the KH-101s. But they do cover the Iskanders and the calibers. So going off of that, we have a general idea that the caliber number is fairly accurate, and also the Iskander number, based off of the amount produced at the beginning of the war, is fairly accurate. However, considering that 1,950 cruise missiles have been launched into Ukrainian territory at that point on May 6, 2022, I don't think the number launched at the bottom is accurate, and I don't know how those numbers are really going to add up. I think there may be a little bit of gray area there, but it does appear that these numbers are somewhat accurate. So with that, we're going to be moving on from this little clip. I don't think, once again, we can take this infographic to heart. I don't think we can quote this. But the numbers of missiles that they had, based off of the pre-war estimates, are largely accurate, but the amount fired we're not entirely certain on. But we are getting the picture that the Russians will be running out of cruise missiles in the coming months, most likely. With that, we're now going to be moving on out of our cruise missile news. Once again, it's nice to see that the Russians are most likely running out of them. And we're now going to be moving into Russia. Most importantly, to show you all the pride and joy of the Russian military, our brave armed forces that they call them, or as they call them in Russia, Nasha Rossiyskaya Armia, which means our Russian army. And so let's take a look at what they did and a function today, from what we know. So let me see here real quick. So yes, it appears that according to the Reddit posts, this looks brand new. No one's pointed this out as being old. Just want to make sure. But here's the video. Matthew, I know you might be busy with the live chat right now, but you've got to check this one out because this is just insane. So here we go. See a Russian formation and a BTR driving by, firing into the air at a parade function, and then takes a hard left. Oh my god.
Oh, why do you just stand there?
I don't even know. Oh my god. Okay, so... And he gets up! Oh my god. You can't even... Oh man. The Russians are just... They can't even make a demonstration and look competent. This is just goofy at this point. What in the world is there even to say about this, Matthew? This is just stupid.
This is their, like, pride and joy military parade.
Yeah.
And they run over a soldier.
Yeah, look at that. Just run him over.
They're demonstrating what's going to happen in actual battle.
Yeah. I just don't even get it. Some people are saying it's from 2012, 2004. We're getting a bunch of them. So it looks like it is old. I swear, that's what I was checking to see if someone was saying in that comment section if it was old. I remembered that it may have been old and it may still be, but still, this isn't really a good look for the Russian army. And considering that this may have just resurfaced recently, but it's maybe old footage, it's still not a good. It's still not a good show. Also, the BTR, after running over the guy, is still firing into the air.
Oh gosh, they probably had no idea they ran him over.
How in the world could they not? I mean, like, watch the BTR. Like, watch it. It hits him. And you can actually see it, like, bouncing around and bumping over him as it just keeps on going. Like, there's no way you can't know that.
Well, it is Russians after all.
I mean, like, it is Russians. They could all be dog drunk. So with that, that's the end of that video, but once again, not a good show for the Russians. Also, speaking of their Nasha Rossiyski Armia, Slava Rossiya, well, you can see down here at Chelibinsk that they're bringing back the units that have been on the front lines in Ukraine, and they look a little rusty, although they've been in action for quite some while. A little bit of armor all ought to fix it. And you can see the Z's clearly painted on them. These aren't recovered Ukrainian BMPs that were destroyed on the field. These are all destroyed BMP-2s that the Russians have recovered from the field from their side. And with that, that's the end of the video, and it looks like the Russians may be trying to get in on that Ukrainian scrap metal business a little bit themselves, but I don't think it will be long-lived for them because they're being pushed out of the scrap fields. And so with that, going to be moving on from this bit of news, but once again showing y'all that the losses that the Russians are taking on the field are pretty significant, and they're even bringing them back into Russia probably to melt them down and try and use them somehow or some way. We're now moving on into the last bit of news from the side of Russia, in the area of Yekaterinburg, where we saw that a massive warehouse has once again caught on fire. It looks like the chain smoker has now made it on vacation, on leave into Yekaterinburg, and now he's decided to burn up this entire warehouse used to transport supplies and cargo around Russia. Quite a large fire. And it looks like it's burning completely uncontrolled. There's not even a fire brigade around. Yeah, that's just going to continue to burn out that entire warehouse. No one's trying to stop it at all. So with that, that's the end of the video, but I'd like to see that Russian warehouses are still burning down over large areas of Russia, and this time deep within Russia in the Ural Mountains of all places. Just in case y'all don't know the significance of the Ural Mountains, let me explain. The Ural Mountains is right over here, and you can actually see them. They go all the way down the middle of Russia, all the way down to Kazakhstan. This divides Europe, in fact, from Asia, this mountain range. So everything west of it is in Europe, so this is the European part of Russia, and everything east of it is in Asia. So it's pretty important geographically, but not only that, Yekaterinburg is kind of the gateway to the east. And so seeing that a massive supply warehouse, most likely connecting Russia's domestic and military logistics from the east to the west, has now burned down, and it looks like a fire brigade isn't even going to try and quell or control the fire. It's kind of showing that there may be some decent supply issues that may result from that. Once again, we can't really measure it all too well because the Russians will keep it incredibly hushed how bad the logistics are being run inside of Russia, but you will always be able to see the end result. We've seen it during the partial mobilizations, we see it on the front lines, and we see it whenever a Russian somehow uploads a video to YouTube of him walking around a mall. You always get to see how bad the logistics really are from all the shops that are shut down, all the soldiers that don't have any equipment, and also all the soldiers on the front line that hardly even have bulletproof vests. And it's all telltale signs that these kinds of things are having a massive impact on the Russian war effort and also the home front situation domestically for most Russians who aren't even involved in the war. And so with that, It looks like, once again, Russia's starting to go through tough times from the video evidence we're getting. And so we're now going to be moving on from inside of Russia and back towards Ukraine, real quick, to address our location unknowns. And so, starting off, we'll only be addressing the first 4 of them. And so we're going to move into our first one, where we can see that the Ukrainians have dropped some more grenades. And so here's the video. We can see the Russian trench here. We can see the Russians inside the trench moving around. You can see the drone just taking a good look. Russians completely unaware, as usual. Now we see the drone is now looking down at the trench again. And sadly, it looks like we didn't get to see it fall, but we can see the smoke from where the bomblet fell on the same spot of the trench it was looking in. And we can see 2 Russians moving around. And it looks like they're all climbing out of the trenches and, of course, going for the old 10K run. And that guy, he is gone. He's probably running straight to the Ukrainian front lines to surrender at this very moment. And so it's nice to see that the Russians are making concerted efforts to realize when the situation isn't really in their advantage anymore, and that they're going to try and hopefully surrender and not just run off to another position. With that, we're going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian Buk once again engaging more targets, this time from the inside of the Buk, which kind of shows you, this is a Ukrainian one, the Russians also use these a decent amount as well. It kind of shows you how old-fashioned a Buk really is. These things are quite old, and if we pull them up, Buk Sam. Rather than, I gotta be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of the Buk. The name of this thing also sounds like puke, so it doesn't really add a lot to the appeal of the system. Also, this thing's called a Grizzly by its NATO name, but you can see them here. These things entered service in the Soviet Army in 1980, making these things a total 44 years old, which in military terms is incredibly old for a weapon system that has gotten absolutely no upgrades from when it was introduced in service. So, moving on through, we can see here that it was designed, actually, in 1972, but it entered service in 1980. So even then, it's dated really more towards about 50 years old at that point. Moving on down, we can see, let's see, the Cube that then turned into the Bukes. And then we can see that the other variants of the Bukes, but by and large, these things are quite old. You can see the interior of one of them right there. And I'm surprised that either side is using them at this point. Of course, Ukraine gets a bit of a pass because the Ukrainians really didn't pride themselves as being the best and most advanced military in the world. They just pride themselves on being an independent nation. And now that they've been thrust into this war, they have to use whatever is at their disposal. But it is a little bit of a slap in the face to the Russians' silly and just stupid, like, I guess you could say, prideful remark at this point where they say, we have the best army in the world. They're using something that has an interior and a control design like that. But anyways, let's get back over to it and let's see it shoot down a target. You see the radar over here showing the target? We now see the outside footage of the launching its missile. And sadly, we didn't get to see it shoot anything down, but it was cool to see the inside of that thing and how it looks. It looks, honestly, like something straight out of, like, the original series Star Trek. If I don't know about you, Matthew, but this looks like Mr. Spock's about to say, Captain, we have something on the sensors.
Yes, it does, actually.
Yeah, and so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little Buk and on into our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians about to hit a target. Let's see them about to hit a target. And we can see it's an OSA. Now, one thing I like to point out is that it's coming in, and what's odd, so they cut the video right here, and on top of that, the crosshair was slowly moving. It started off on the left side of the OSA, and then by the end of the video, it was quickly shifting off the OSA and towards the street. And I think that's why they cut the footage where they didn't show you the impact, because this thing actually just flew over a little bit to the right side of the OSA and blew up, really causing no more damage than puncturing the side of the, I guess you could say, the frame. So, with that, once again, Russian propaganda at its finest, Russians always rely on someone trying to fill in the blanks. They never really show you the footage outright. Like, see, here's the OSA, here's the drone flying in, here's the secondary drone showing you that it hit directly dead on. This thing completely missed, and the Russians cut this video and want you to use your imagination to fill in the blank that, oh my god, they took out an OSA, when they really didn't. And so with that, once again, great to see the Russians are still pulling their dumb scams that they've always been pulling as usual, their propaganda. And now it's time to move on to our next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see that the Ukrainians shot down a Shahed drone. And this is actually the footage of that Buke from earlier, or the coup, that shot down that drone. So here's the full uninterrupted video of them hitting it. See the missile on its way. We now see it flying towards the Shahed. Oh. Looks like the go-kart motor was put out of its misery, and that Shahed won't be making it far. And so with that, that's the end of that little video. But I gotta say, Matthew, I wonder what that sounded like up there when that missile finally hit the Shahed. I bet it sounded like and then it just died.
Yes, probably so.
Yeah, probably. And it's nice to know that the Ukrainians are doing the best they can to try and shoot down all Russian cruise missiles and also Iranian suicide drones that they can. And one thing I haven't ever said on this channel, but I think it is a good point to bring up, is isn't it pitiful that Russian industry is so derelict and lost that they have to rely on the Iranians to get any kind of new equipment to breathe life into this dying war that they're running? Isn't that kind of sad, Matthew?
That is kind of sad. And I saw a question from the live chat. Somebody said they wasted $1 million missile on a drone.
Yes, they. Well, wait a minute. Hang on. Before I say it's $1 million, let's pull up a Buke SAM cost. So let's go to here. And let's see if we can find a cost on Wikipedia. So, scrolling on through. Wow. Jeez, this thing... Wait a minute, hang on. There is no way... Okay, that's the ballistic missile system. Apparently, that is not the surface-to-air missile. I was going to be like, there's no way that this thing has an 87-mile range. But then again, it probably does. But let's move on from that. Operational history... Let's see. We're trying to move through. You can see here that we have some technical specs on these Bukes. We can also see a Finnish Buke right here, because in case y'all don't know, the Finnish actually bought a lot of Soviet equipment during the Cold War, and they also bought a lot of Western equipment as well. It's kind of weird. But anyways, moving on from that. Let's see here. It's really hard to find the cost of that missile. How much does a Buke missile cost? A missile is worth $200 million.
Whoa.
That's a lie. Those things are not worth $200 million because they wouldn't ever be able to financially recover from launching one. They would turn into Tiger King and they would say, I'm never going to financially recover from this. So let's keep on moving. So the S-400 surface-to-air missile costs $500 million, so that gives you a little bit of a context. That this one probably costs a lot less. So how much does a... It's really hard to find an answer on that one.
Really? I would say.
Like,
we can't
geez.
find the answer at all.
Buke missile cost. Let's see if we type that in. That's just a straight up lie from this website. $200 million for a single missile. There's not a missile in the world that costs that much money, especially one made in 1980. So... It keeps on saying...
I did see somebody in the live chat say that as long as it saves lives, it's worth it. But my question is there another way to take down the drone rather than using that large missile, or is that their only option?
There are other ways. They could use a Shilka. They could also use man pads. They could really use any kind of air defense system that they have to shoot it down. But at the same time, do you want to wait for that system to be in the area? What if there isn't one in that area? Are they going to decide to not expend? Because I can see now that everyone's saying that these things cost $200,000 a pop, which is a lot more affordable even for the size of the missile. Would you rather spend $200,000 to save an undetermined amount of Ukrainian citizens' lives, or would you rather not fire the missile and hope that another air defense system can shoot it down before it makes it to its target? That's probably something that the Ukrainians have weighed out, and so now their standing order is that if there are any air targets that are in the air, any available surface-to-air missile system must respond regardless the size. So even if it's an Orion, they will most likely fire a entire Buke missile at the thing just because they're trying to take them out before they can get anywhere and try and report any valuable information. And so I hope that addresses that question fairly well. And of course, that does start to get into the question, and a lot of people find this a hard question to ask, but it is one that will be asked if you ever get into these circles. Is the cost of firing that weapon reasonable for the amount of damage it will stop from being inflicted? Like, let's say the Shahed hit a building. If it only expended about $50,000 worth of damage and killed one person, then that might start to throw into the question for some whether it would be worth it to fire off that missile and save that life and about $50,000 worth of damage or not. But then again, usually that's thrown aside because the moral answer would be, regardless of the cost, it's worth saving a life. And so with that, once again, I hope that we addressed that fairly well. And we're now going to be moving on into our polls and 3 questions from the chat real quick, and then we'll continue on with our location unknowns. I know it's kind of weird to chop up the location unknown segment into 2, but I really had no better alternative tonight because the news and how it was structured was very weird with what kind of areas and topics we were covering. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and for our first question segment, we have 2 polls to address, and the first one said, do you think the BTR operator knew that he ran over the soldier in the formation? It looks like 52% said no, he had no idea what happened, 24% said I don't know really, and 24% also said yes, he had to have known. Now for me, I personally say that he did not know what happened, or why would he keep basically driving over the guy as he's getting crushed? Or at least smushed by the tank a little bit. You know, clearly he had to have felt something under the tank, but, you know, he didn't stop. I don't know if that's Russian stupidity or he just didn't know or what, but I would have to probably guess no. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to assume he had. There is no way he couldn't, because if we go back and let's go back and review that video real quick. I know it's an old one, but still, it's become the point of great discussion tonight. Okay, so see him driving. He runs the guy over. He drives on over him. And then you can see a little bit of hesitation there after he got off of him. It looks like he slowed down for just a second and then started to speed up again, and they kept on firing. We can also see this truck back here certainly knew what happened. So I think that they did know what happened inside that BTR. I think the driver did know that he ran someone over. Let me check this real quick. BTR, where's the driver? Where's the driver in a BTR? Images. Alright. So the driver is over here on the left side. So he's got periscopes up here, and if you keep the front windshields closed, you can't see nothing. The periscopes, you can probably only see out of so much. But there's no way! I mean, like, think about that. He has 2 periscopes over here that was facing that soldier. One completely at 90 degrees to the left, and another one that's kind of at 45 degrees to the left as well. So there's absolutely no way that I can think of that he didn't see that guy, even with the periscopes and the poor visibility that they probably have. So with that, I would have to say he probably did know he ran him over, but they just kept on going like nothing ever happened. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, folks, I see the bots are out in force tonight, so if you see a bot, tag a bot, let me know, and also tag me in your message so I can get rid of them with the Stugna. But anyways, we're moving on to our second and last poll of the segment, which says, does it seem like Ukraine's military momentum is staying consistent or slowing down? It looks like 57% said it's consistent, 31% said they are slowing down, and 12% said I'm not sure. Now, I'm kind of surprised at the results on this one. I would have to say that their momentum is pretty consistent, personally. But it looks like 31% disagree. So, Enforcer, what do you think?
I would actually have to disagree with you, Matthew, and agree with the majority that they are slowing down a little bit. Because while they have made ground in the Northeast, it is not that lightning speed offensives that they were having at the very start of these counterattacks, neither in Kherson either. In fact, we haven't heard of any frontline advances in Kherson over the past week and a half. So it seems that everything down here has halted, as well as everything in the Northeast, although it's continuing on at a smoldering pace. And for that reason, I do think they're slowing down. They may be trying to reorganize their supply lines, reorganize their communications, because in case if anyone didn't know, which this adds a whole layer of morality into a decision that a certain person made, the Ukrainian army relied heavily on the Starlink system to communicate with each other. And so by shutting it off, they may be putting lives at jeopardy because now Ukrainian units cannot communicate as effectively as they once did. And I know a lot of people are about to say, well, the army uses shortwave radio systems and other kinds of communication techniques. And I'll tell y'all this, historically, based off of what's happened with Eastern armies like the Russians in Georgia, that usually falls apart within days or hours of a war beginning. And with the Russians in 2008, radio communications completely fell apart as soon as the offensive began, and the Russians had to rely on landlines to communicate to their command headquarters. So they would literally go up to a payphone, throw in a few quarters, and call up their command and tell them what was going on because the radios didn't work. And so that seems to have largely happened to both sides, and so they're relying almost entirely on cell phones and other kinds of, I guess you could say, communication devices that normal civilians would use and citizens. And so they relied on Starlink heavily to keep on going, and now that it's largely being shut off at this point, and it has had massive outages that we've heard of, the Ukrainian army may be slowing down for that reason now that there's been a communications breakdown, and they're trying to make sure that everyone can be on the same page as to what's happening. So, with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well. I think they are slowing down. It may be because of the communication breakdown. It may also be so that way they can reorganize their supply lines. One thing's for certain, though, they aren't facing any kind of heavier Russian resistance because there isn't any at all. We can see that each time they get their logistics reorganized and operational again, they start moving through Russian lines like there's nothing there. So it's mostly something behind the lines, probably supply-wise or communication-wise. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one. Well, if we have another one. If we don't have another one, we're on to the questions.
All right, so that is the last poll of this segment. I just totally went blank there for a minute. So we're now moving on to our super chats. And up first, we have a $50 donation from Enforcer for President, who says LSA for life, Slav Ukraine, and and also, real quick, Enforcer for President, it is your birthday. So happy birthday to you. You've been around forever, and hopefully you're having a good B-Day.
And thank you so much for the support, Enforcer for President. And happy birthday, too! I saw you say that in the 10-minute countdown, and I, too, wished you a happy birthday during the live chat countdown. But now that we've gotten to this point where we can address your super chat, I want everyone to tell Enforcer for President a huge happy birthday. He's been around forever, and of course, he has already pledged his vote to me for president in 2040, which is pretty cool. And so with that, I hope you've been having a great day, Enforcer for President. I hope you've enjoyed time with your family, had a little bit of cake, maybe gone out to celebrate at a restaurant or something like that, and now you have settled down at the very end of the day to watch this news. And hopefully it is, I guess, like a great add-on to the day, like a little bit of a treat or something like that. I hope so, because you're watching. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Enforcer for President, and happy birthday as well. Everyone here in the Lee Spring Army is sending a million birthday wishes your way, and I hope that it helps you to live on a very long time. There was a joke around before Queen Elizabeth II passed away that the reason why she was living so long is that everyone kept on singing God Save the Queen, and so they just kept on keeping her alive. And so I wonder if everyone sends you a happy birthday wish, will you have many more of them? I hope so, because you're getting like thousands of them right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and once again, happy birthday.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $50 super chat from Justice Ryan, who says, what's the scenario if Ukraine forces Russia back to the original border and there's a ceasefire? Unless Putin is ousted in a coup, won't he start a third world war first 2014 and second now, back into Ukraine once his forces are resupplied 6 months to 1 year later.
One thing I would have to say is that there's a high chance, a high possibility that the Russians would not be put together in 6 months to a year. Looking at the United States in the First World War, just to put this into perspective, the United States, when we entered the war in August, I believe, of 1917, let me make sure that's correct. When did the U.S. join World War One? It was August or April? Okay. Oh, wait, hang on. Declare war. House concurred. United States declared war. Wow, crazy. I thought it was August. Anyways, wait a minute, hang on. I know that's something. When did the first U.S. troops arrive in France, World War One? Wow, I don't even know where I got August from, because they entered in June. Anyways, moving on from that, when the United States declared war in 1917, the War Department, which is what the Department of Defense used to be called, and honestly I think it's a more appropriate name for it, they said that it would take 17 and a half months for the U.S. Army and the U.S. military to mobilize completely and for their industry to be able to support that mobilization. Based off of that, I don't think the Russians could recover in 6 months to a year, especially considering that a lot of their military rebuilding will have to rely on the sanctions not existing. So you're probably looking at a window far longer than the U.S. was looking at in World War I, probably about 36 months' time before their entire military was restructured and rebuilt, even to a point that I guess you could say is 90s grade Russian army. It would mostly take a lot longer, and it would take the sanctions being lifted for them to get back up to, I guess you could say, their pre-war standing with the small amount of modern equipment or upgraded tanks that they had then. So with that in mind, I would have to say that the Russians most likely will not reorganize. But moving on from that, reorganize in time for it to be effective in this war. If the Russians are pushed back to the pre-2014 borders and then pushed back to the if they're pushed back to the 2014 borders and then the pre-2014 borders, and so they have no land holdings in Ukraine, I think I could see it going around these kinds of lines. Well, actually, there's a couple of options, because there's never a surefire option to anything. One, the Russians and Ukrainians declare a ceasefire at that point to agree on some kind of a peace deal, but the peace deal never comes around, and so they're put into a permanent state of suspended animation where they're officially at war, but there's a standing ceasefire that would not be broken, but then probably broken on several occasions, which would lead to everyone being like, oh my god, it's starting again, and then they'd probably agree to another ceasefire. So it would probably end up being that a large majority of Ukraine's southeastern borders would look like Donetsk and Luhansk, as they did from 2014 all the way to 2022, where there's just a large trench work and front line that has sporadic fighting occurring here and there. That could be something that occurs in between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Or it could be that they push the Russians back, and by that point there's a coup, and due to the coup, the Russian army would be getting steamrolled in Ukraine. They would be pushed back to their pre-2014 borders, and then Russia would peace out because the new government would be trying to get in favor with the public. Or there is the third option, which is always not a cheery option. The Russians could get pretty desperate and actually nuke Ukraine, but at that point, that seems to be strategically asinine, because the Russian government probably wouldn't survive that kind of decision. No, I'm not saying by an American nuclear response. Domestically, they probably wouldn't survive a decision like that. Then they would invoke the wrath of the entire Western world, or at least the United States, which would seriously put them on the back foot. And then they would lose that war anyways, because the Russian military isn't even up to snuff to deal with Ukraine, much less to deal with the United States. So with that in mind, with those three options being considered, and I think the third one would be the most unlikely one, I think that it would be in between one or the other. Either they get pushed back and there's like a permanent ceasefire, kind of like there is in between North and South Korea, or there would be a pushback and then the Russian government would get overthrown, and then there would be some kind of a peace treaty. I feel, though, one thing that I do have to say, and I think this is something that a lot of people have to keep in mind, is the whole reason this war is being fought is over the basing rights for the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. Pretty much the whole reason, if you look at it back in 2014, and why Russia annexed Crimea, was because this is their only warm water port in the entirety of the Russian Federation. And so back in the day, back before the Revolution of Dignity, the Black Sea Fleet had been based at Sevastopol since 1991 at the collapse of the Soviet Union. And once, I believe it was Yanukovych that was the president at the time, he was a pro-Russian president, he got ousted during the Revolution of Dignity. That's when the Russians sprang into action the quote-unquote uprisings in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, and also annexed Crimea, was so that way they could keep a hold onto those basing rights in Sevastopol, because the new pro-EU government in Ukraine most likely would have revoked it, considering that the European Union is more aligned to the US sphere, and it wouldn't make sense for a US or European aligned nation to be housing Russian naval ships in Sevastopol, which is not in their sphere, and also somewhat of a rival. So I think that is something that would most likely be trying to be agreed on. The Russians would be like, hey, could we maybe get basing rights in Sevastopol and we'll give you all back Crimea? Although they wouldn't really be in a point to negotiate that. And if the Ukrainians said yes, the war would probably end. If the Ukrainians said no, then it would probably go into a permanent ceasefire. And that's what I'm kind of looking at. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. Once again, that's all just my speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. There are a lot of experts out there that say, I have the key and I have the answer, and really no one has the key, and I don't really have the key nor the answer either. So all of this is just speculation on my end. So take it with a grain of salt, but that's what I'm thinking. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and the last one of this segment goes to Mark, Slav Ukraine, who puts in a $50 donation and says, did we confirm that the Russia contract for repairs to the Kerch Bridge for 31st of July 2023 is actually correct?
From what I've heard, and I have tried to look into that today, it does seem to be accurate. It seems that the Russian Crimean Bridge, on the Ukrainian side of the Kerch Strait, cannot be repaired until about the midsummer of 2023. And so the road section of the bridge has entirely been knocked out, and any road traffic will rely entirely on the ferry crossing across the Kerch Strait. And from what I know, it seems as if, and let me check this to make sure, it seems as if there is a ferry crossing from the Kerch port here that then crosses over here to the other side of the Kerch Strait. And I don't even know what the name of this is. It looks like they have a cafe there, though. That's literally called cafe. That's kind of dumb. That's like having a restaurant called restaurant. But either there's a ferry crossing here at this derelict Port Krim, or there's another ferry crossing in the Kerch city that crosses over to the other side. And almost all road traffic heading into or out of Crimea will rely on that ferry to cross. The bridge for them may as well be out, or you will be sitting on it for hours trying to cross the one lane that will be open until about a year later. Well, really more like 8 months later. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. Mark just said the rail bridge looks pretty messed up too, and I did see the video of that. I don't think I ever included it in the news, but it looks like it did suffer a lot of heat damage, as well as the rails melting where they were. And rails melting isn't that big of damage. You can quickly replace rail segments. Concrete railroad ties can also be replaced fairly easily, probably within a couple of days. But the tempered steel that bridge is made out of has probably suffered a lot of heat damage and is probably no longer tempered because of that. And so there's probably a lot of questions as to whether it can sustain the weight, or it has the same lifespan that it had before the attack and the burning of the oil cars on top of it. That's one thing we don't know for certain, but I would have to say it does seem like it has taken somewhat decent damage, and as far as I know, rail traffic has not resumed over the Crimean Bridge as of right now. Then again, that can be wrong, so take that with a grain of salt. And so with that, we are now moving on out of this question segment. I thank you all so much once again for y'all's support, and also throwing in some really interesting rabbit hole questions that we could go into. And so with that, we're now going to continue on with our location unknown news, and then go into the northeastern area of the Eastern Front. And so with that, moving back into our location unknown news, we can see the Russians got destroyed again by an ATGM in this little video right here. We can see some Russians right there. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I think that may be the Ukrainians firing an SPG-9 or some similar ATGM. And now we can see a fire in a tree line, but we don't know what exactly is burning over there. So we can't confirm what kind of Russian loss it is, but something is on fire. It may be ammunition. With that, we're moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, where you can see a Russian tank being hit by Ukrainian artillery. Kind of a bit of a norm at this point, but let's take a look at it. We can hear some kind of music in the background. When you see the tank right there, we can also see the barrel sticking out, and we can see the deep treads that's made in the ground. You see some kind of a, from America, I think that says from America with love. Aw, isn't that nice?
I like. Yeehaw!
We now see him firing the M777. And now we see that tank. And oh man, a dead-on hit. We saw some fire come out of the top of the tank. And now we can see that the thing's turned into a nice burning blaze. Something that the Russians will never show you if they try to hit a Ukrainian tank. This shows us that that Russian tank has definitely become a bit of a Bunsen burner. A quite large one at that. Well, that's the end of the video, and I'd like to see that From America with Love hit its target and also took out another Russian tank. And I guess you would have to say that this is probably a very American thing. We're now moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can also see that the Ukrainians captured a T-90A! Hey! Let's go. So let's take a look at this. Also, we got some kind of a Kung Fu Panda music playing. And we can see here that they are getting the T-90 up onto a... Well, actually, it's on a low boy. So they didn't have the threat of rolling this thing off the side and crushing someone with it, which commonly happens on the higher trailers. And we see here that they painted some Ukrainian tridents on it. And it is now theirs. Look at that. A T-90A. Now, I would say that these tanks are pretty good, but the honest truth is that they're just an upgraded T-72. So, by and large, not as great as you would think. These things aren't comparable to an M1A2 Abrams with a SEP package, or even just a normal M1A2. But they are still a little bit better than the normal run-of-the-mill Russian tank. And so it looks like the Ukrainians have captured another zinger. And then the Russians are probably weeping. I know that we're about to have a bot surge in a minute as they all flood in and go, oh, we're winning this war. They're going to nuke them. Or something like that.
Yes.
And so with that, we're going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see that the Ukrainians have gotten a brand new present from the United States with love. We see here they've gotten a PRSL-1 grenade launcher. Of course, it comes in a nice package. The Ukrainians always show off the packaging. This one was shipped via Amazon Prime. And look at that packaging, Matthew. That's like something you would see in a gun store nearly, like when they have a gun for sale and it's like in a little gun case and stuff.
Yes, that's quite pleasing to my eyes, actually.
Yeah.
I like the organization.
Yeah, I love it. I love how they have it categorized into its little segments and groups for its modifications. They even added in a vertical foregrip. How kind of them.
I wonder how much this costs.
Probably not a lot. Probably like $1,000. I'm just kidding. I have no idea. It's probably fairly expensive. And also, is it just me, Matthew, or does this look a lot like an RPG?
It does, and it looks like a mini RPG or something.
PRSL-1. PSRL-1 is a modified American clone of the Soviet-Russian RPG-7. So it is literally the American ripoff of the RPG-7, which is really cool. And I didn't know we made that. Apparently the United States uses them, Ukraine now uses them, obviously, Turkey, and Peru. Really neat. Apparently it's made by Airtronic USA. Airtronic USA.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, I've never heard of them either. What do they make? So they make the PSRL. They make the M203, which is an underslung grenade launcher. They also make the Sonus, which is a law enforcement grenade launcher. Let's check out their line of products real quick. So, just in case if any of the discerning viewers would like to get their hands on one of these, you probably can't, but still, let's take a look at them. It looks like they have a normal RPG shell. They have the ripoff RPG-7. It looks like they have an even lighter weight version of the exact same thing. And then they have a whole bunch of underslung grenade launchers. So that's probably why we never heard of them, Matthew, is because these are definitely not at a normal gun store. But still, it's pretty neat to see that we're sending over rip-off RPGs, and it looks like they are higher quality than the normal ones.
If the Ukrainians made like an unboxing channel, I'd subscribe in like 2 seconds.
Honestly, I would too. If they just got all of the gear that they've gotten from the Western world and started doing reviews on it, that would actually be really cool, and a great library of knowledge to people who want to know a little bit about military equipment, like the average aficionado. We can see that they even came with a little sight that they just screwed onto an M-lock rail.
This guy's smiling too because he knows it's cool.
Yeah, and there's the vertical foregrip that he's now putting onto the M-lock. They added everything to this thing. We see them laughing and joking like it's a Christmas present. It kind of is. It looks really nice. And so with that, that's the end of the video.
Oh wow. Look at that. It came with a nice strap too.
Yeah, he got the strap. They about get clapped. And so that's the end of the video. But I gotta say, really nice delivery. Nice little case. Came in a nice packaging. It even looks good. I mean, like the United States hooks the Ukrainians up daily with all kinds of neat toys and gadgets that they'll be able to use to whip the Russians. And it also gives us a pretty good look at what American gear is like directly compared to the Russians. And Matthew, I was actually wandering around on an app the other day, and I saw someone say, I don't think people realize what a war with Russia will really mean. And I was like, what in the world? Where in the world does this guy live? Like under a rock? You know, like, has he seen the Russian army in action? You know,
there's still people I've heard talking at university that think that Russia is a powerhouse. And I'm like, have you been watching the news or have you been watching any of the war footage?
Yeah, have you been?
And they're like, yeah, but they're still a powerhouse. I'm like, no, they're not.
No, they're not. I think one thing's become certain, almost amongst everyone who watches the news on this war, that the Russians were never, after 1991, a military powerhouse, and they're certainly not an economic one either. And so I don't know why people keep on working under that illusion. It is that entire mindset is the phantom of the Cold War, where people thought that the Soviet Union was a powerhouse, and at the time they kind of were, although they were still technologically behind the US by nearly a decade and a half by the 1980s. They still, I mean, it's just unbelievable to think that people still think that the Russians are strong. Like, let me show you this, Matthew. Did you know that the Russians actually had a computer program, like, inside the Soviet Union?
They actually made one?
Yes, the Soviet computer program. I've got to show you all this because this is one of the major reasons why they failed. Soviet computer technology, they really did nothing. They really put no effort into this. And also, believe it or not, because it's the Soviet Union, unlike the West, and I got to say this is one thing that I will say with absolute certainty. Capitalist competition leads to far better results than communist competition, because communist competition really relies on who do you rub elbows the best with in the government, and it has nothing to do with the viability or the competence of your product that you're trying to deliver. That's what killed the entire Soviet computer systems, is that a certain company that made a far worse computer was in I guess you could say vogue with the people in charge of the Soviet government in that division at the time, and so they would prioritize their I guess you could say quotas of equipment deliveries over the other company that actually had a viable computer, and so they pretty much slaughtered their own computer industry before it even got off the ground. But looking at this is a Ural 1. This is about the most decent computer they had in the 50s. Not that bad looking compared to an American one, but once you started to get into the 60s, the differences just started to become incredibly bad. Really, really bad, actually. They tried to import some IBM computers because they were so far behind that there was no way that they could compete with the West unless they were to try and copy them. And so they brought in IBMs, they tried to copy them, and they did such a terrible job at copying IBMs that this is what the Soviets did, man. They said, you know what? Screw it. We're just going to make fake companies. We're going to buy the IBMs from the United States and then import them over here and slap Russian brand labels on them so that way it looks like it's Soviet made.
Classic. And of course, how did they use it? They turn it into a bot farm. That's what they do.
Yeah, they turned it into a bot farm. We can actually see some Soviet computers in the 80s, and we can see that they were kind of getting a little similar to, I guess you could say, the IBM computers of the time. But one thing I'd like to point out to everyone is that right there, you see that, Matthew, that backwards EBM?
Yes.
That means IBM in Russian.
Really?
Yeah.
And I was thinking on the table there, that looks like one of the early Mac computers, like the apples on the table there. You see
Yeah.
what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and so you can kind of see that they were trying to imitate or at least directly buy Western computers to try and keep up. But that's what kind of killed the Soviet Union, because while the United States was able to take off industrially, we were able to compute, because the job of a computer was to do computations back in the day. It wasn't really for what they are now, like what we're using it for. We could compute things in metallurgy that the Russians had no possibility of doing. The math was getting far too advanced for normal computers, which at the time were people who did the math, to do. It would take an unlimited amount of hours and an unbelievable amount of manpower to get that kind of work done. And the US was just soaring ahead. They were able to do things that the Soviets weren't able to because they didn't have the computer technology to do it. And so that's one of the reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed, is also because they fell way behind in computation technology, like these computers that are clearly IBM's, as it says on the wall. And so they died. And so, moving on to this, we can also see the most widely produced Soviet computer, the BK0010, a very merchandisable name. What kind of computer
Enforcer. You know what that keyboard looks like?
Let's see. It looks like. What does it look like to you before I say anything?
You know the like cashier terminals at McDonald's?
Oh,
They used to press like the Big Mac button and stuff like that. It
Yeah.
looks just like that.
Yeah, it does. It kind of does, actually. Also, I don't like the color coding on this. It's just ugly. Like, who came up with this? Also, we're not even going to get into the Soviet Union was a very interesting animal because it was just so stupid. You could get into Soviet consumerism. They also ran commercials and ads, although there was no point to do that whatsoever. And the ads were just really bizarre. But anyways, we're going to move on further down. And that's pretty much it. So I can't really go too far into Soviet computing history. I'll have to do a lot of extra research to get y'all a really good explanation of how it worked and everything, but that's kind of the rundown and one of the reasons why they fell behind. Also, with this in mind and circling all the way back to what we were talking about here, that is why Western stuff is far better than Soviet equipment, because this kind of technological gap phased over into their military systems as well. If you look at US equipment in the 80s versus Soviet equipment in the 80s, there's a massive difference. For example, let me just show y'all real quick. An F-15A cockpit. So let's take a look at an F-15A. So, this is a cockpit of an F-15A. That's what it looked like when it was introduced into service in 1975. Here's what an SU, and let me make sure I get this right, SU-25, no, SU-20, SU-31, I believe it was. SU-31 aircraft, SU-31 fighter jet, come on. All right. Introduced in 1982. This is the one I'm thinking about, cockpit. Now, I don't know about y'all, but this screams late 1950s F-4 Phantom to me, not an F-15A like we see here. The F-15A actually had display screens in it. The Su-31 doesn't. For very apparent reasons. They didn't have the technology to make anything computation-wise as advanced as us. So this is a massive rabbit hole that we're going through, but you can see there clearly, this jet came out in service 7 years after the F-15, and inside its cockpit, the technological disparities in between the West and the East were more apparent than ever before, especially right there. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this massive rabbit hole and into our next segments of news outside of the location unknowns on the northeastern front, where we can see that a M777 from the 40th Artillery Brigade was firing at the Russians with a little bit of help from the 92nd and was scoring some pretty solid hits, like that one right there. We now see the fire starting to brew after the artillery shell hit, showing us that that is certainly destroyed. We now see another artillery shell hit in another location. You see here another Russian tank being hit. That one also looks like one we showed in the location unknowns. So it looks like we now have a location for that tank. Now see the tank burning as the drone backs away. We now see them showing us another tank right there. Very interesting camera edit right there. I don't know who was thinking when they did that, but it looks like it hit right on the front, flinging out some shells. Well, some sparks. And now it's in a nice little brew as well. But you see them trying to auto-stabilize the camera. That's why there's like these little black triangles that are eking in on each side. But that vehicle is also burning quite well as well. And that gives us a pretty good idea that the 40th Artillery Brigade, in accompaniment with the 92nd, is doing quite a good job at taking out Russian vehicles in this area of the front line again. Also, Matthew, I saw something funny. I thought this one was a good laugh. I'm not going to name the viewer, but they said, technology is overrated. Go brute force and muscle like they did in the 40s. And I think that's I think that's why the Russians are getting plastered right now, because that's their mindset, and the West emphasizes technology while they emphasize brute force and motor oil, and we can see that motor oil burns brightly when you can see it through an infrared camera. And so with that, we're going to be moving further down towards Soviet, where we saw that the 57th is also destroying a little bit of their own Russians, in particular some main battle tanks. Here's a video. When you see the first one get hit right there, and we can see the second one get hit right there. Brilliant burning balls of fire and two more Russian main battle tanks that will never be operational on the front of Ukraine again. We're now going to be moving on further down the front line and into our next bit of news. Further down towards the Verkno-Kamyanka area. But before we get down here, I just remembered we have to cover the next segment of polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks. So for this second to last question segment, we have two more polls to address. And the first one said, do you think Zelensky's reaction to Elon Musk's comments were appropriate? It looks like 79% said yes, he was rightfully upset. 10% said his response was questionable, and 10% said no, Zelensky overreacted to Musk. Now, first off, I think we all can come to a consensus that Musk's comments were misguided at the least and stupid at worst. But I would have to say that although it's understandable the way Zelensky responded, I think that he might have shot himself in the foot a little bit, because now it appears that Musk is doing kind of like a tit for tat kind of thing. All of a sudden, the strange timing about funding being an issue with the Starlink system. I don't think the timing is just a coincidence. I think it's sort of, I guess you could say, retaliation. That's kind of a strong word, but that's basically what it is in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens if the DoD is actually going to start funding the system, because it doesn't appear that SpaceX is, from what I've heard. But Enforcer, what do you think?
And real quick, before I answer that poll, I would like to address something real quick. The quote I took from this viewer, they were being ironic and sarcastic with it. They said that in the live chat. I'm very sorry about that. I have to let everyone know that while we carry over some sarcasm on stream, hopefully our tone of voice carries the sarcasm over quite well. Sometimes it doesn't, but it is really hard to get sarcasm out of text, because you can't get that kind of, I guess you could say, innuendo. So I'm very sorry about that. I thought you were being entirely serious there. I don't want you to think at all that I think that you were being serious if you weren't. Just everyone know that if you do throw in a sarcastic comment in the live chat, we can't tell reading it if it is or isn't. We're like, we're like, wait a minute, does that person really believe that? So I'm sorry about that once again. But moving back to the poll, I would have to say, honestly, Matthew, that Musk is kind of digging himself in a ditch, because now he said some things about Taiwan where the People's Republic of China is offering him a tax break if he sets up shop in China. So I don't. I'm kind of starting to think that this guy is starting to hit all the wrong boxes in terms of politics, and it doesn't really sound like he's saying anything conducive to the American sphere. He's saying things that are almost detrimental to it, to the point that foreign powers, like, in fact, here's another interesting comment today. A Russian general actually offered him political asylum if he fled to Russia.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't really think he's saying things that are aligning with the interests of the US and European sphere. So with that in mind, and also considering this, because one thing I have to say is that when you think about it, now, I do think still that the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany's comments that were said to Musk were out of line. Telling someone to go F themselves when you're in an official diplomatic position is certainly not the role of an ambassador in an official diplomatic position. There could have been a better way to go about that without being so brutish about it. But at the same time, Musk saying that in the tweet, because I went back and made sure to read this tweet over as good as I could. He said that Russia had owned Crimea since 1738 like it was theirs. And it's not theirs. It was Ukrainian land, ever since the dawn of time, pretty much, or it existed as its own state, like the Crimean Khanate. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. All of Ukraine, really all of Eastern Europe is Russia's since 1738. So where do we draw the line? Is Elon going to start saying that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are also part of Russia until that screw up that Gorbachev made? Where is the line going to be drawn there? That line doesn't make a lot of sense.
Enforcer, my question is this, because I can understand why Zelensky responded the way he did, but I think the better approach would have been to basically put ego aside for just a moment and think strategically and avoid, giving the response you want to give, which is telling Musk basically to F off because the comments were ridiculous, and basically forego that to keep the Starlink system in operation, because Zelensky had to know somewhere in his mind that those comments were probably going to have repercussions, and we're starting to see what those consequences are at this point.
But also at another point, Musk, here's one thing I don't like. Okay, because, and I'm going to speak from a little bit of personal experience here. Not going to get too far into the story, but we have had one person from Ukraine spit in the face of this channel. I will not say who, but they are a YouTuber. It's not Starsky. I'll make sure to say that. But we have had someone say that we are not trustworthy for one reason or another. And I took that as great offense at the time. In fact, I took it as such a great offense, didn't let anyone know on stream at the time, this was about a month and a half ago, that I actually started thinking about not running the news anymore, because I was like, that just aggravated the hell out of me. After raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, spending 60 to 70 hours a week working on this stuff every single week, to have someone say that from the country I'm helping about my channel, I didn't really like that much at all. And so I got through it and the reason why I got through it is because we are doing a lot of help for Ukrainians. There are Ukrainians out there. We don't know them, but they are relying and counting on this channel for our news and also our support. Most importantly, the support we made through the fundraisers. So because of that, we kept the channel running and we kept reporting the news, because the channel has a purpose and a mission higher than just someone personally insulting me. It has the purpose of helping out and trying to report the news to everyone and keep this war going. So with that in mind, our channel kept running. We just pushed that aside. We said, you know what? That was a poorly placed comment. We're not going to make a big deal out of it. We're going to keep the news running. Elon, on the other hand, who has said time and time again in the purchase of Twitter, people can say about me whatever they want. I don't care. It's all about free speech. Then someone says something about a comment he made, and I don't have to say that Zelensky's remarks were a lot more tasteful, although they were still, a little bit borderline, than the German ambassador to Ukraine's. For him to sit there and have such a response, it's, looks like Starlink's not being funded anymore, is really lame, and it shows that this entire thing was done as a I guess you could say a corporate stunt, a publicity stunt in a way. It didn't really have any purpose of helping out the Ukrainians. It was just done to make themselves look good. And once they thought, we can just cut the ropes, cut the ties, and still look fine, they did it as soon as they could and bailed out. On top of that,
Enforcer, real quick, what it kind of looks like at this point with the way it's played out? It kind of looks like Elon gave them Starlink in Ukraine, free of charge, basically, and now he's turning around and saying that he wants payment for it. So he's got him hooked on it, and now he wants to get paid. It's kind of what it looks like.
and honestly, I would have to be honest, whatever it is, it's not looking good. Also, the Pentagon has released an official statement saying that, in fact, and this is something interesting, Matthew, because we actually said earlier that that SpaceX had paid for 35 to 50% of the Starlink systems. The Pentagon's now released a statement saying that they paid for 85% of them.
Really?
Yeah, so SpaceX.
So when Musk says that he wants the DoD to pick up the tab, he basically means the remaining like 25%.
Pretty much. I
Wow.
mean, he's by and large, SpaceX has been paying, from what I've been told now, the majority of the internet service that's supposed to be provided. But I thought that that was already supposed to be subsidized by SpaceX anyways, whenever they provide service to an area. If I'm understanding that correctly, if you know any information on that, Matthew.
I don't know a whole bunch of info on that.
So the whole thing doesn't make sense to me. The whole thing was a publicity stunt by the company, and in my opinion at this point, considering that they only paid for 15% of the systems, they hardly had a running budget for this thing, and now they're going to try and hand it all over to the Department of Defense and still ride off of the publicity that they got by giving the system to them. I find that all, in my opinion, not trying to use any strong words, to be quite distasteful, and I think that that's not representative of anyone who would have interests in helping out the United States' strategic interests in Eastern Europe. It looks more so like that's just the interests of a sole company trying to get some kind of a brownie point with the public. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, if Ukraine were to lose Starlink connectivity, would this severely damage their war effort? And of course, the assumption underlying the poll is that the DoD does not pick up the tab, which I personally think they would. But hypothetically speaking, it looks like 49% said yes, it would be a severe effect. 22% said I don't know, I'm unsure, and 29% said no, they will adapt and be fine. Now on this one, I have to admit, I don't know enough about their systems to know if losing Starlink would be devastating, but from the sounds of it, it sounds like their entire communication system relies on it. So they would have to find some way to quickly adapt to a different system, maybe some temporary cell towers or something, but I don't know anything about the field, so I could be ignorant to say that. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say it's probably going to have a pretty decent effect on the Ukrainian armed forces, once again, because radio communications have broke down on both sides. Both sides were relying a lot on telecommunications instead, and Starlink provided that service to the Ukrainian army. Now that it's being cut off, and there has been outages in some areas, and I know some people are saying there hasn't been. There has been. It's been documented, and it's been something I've heard about. And so it's definitely happening. It seems as though that it could be a bit of a detriment to the Ukrainian army. They'll have to find a way to improvise and overcome that problem, or the Department of Defense or someone will have to pick up the bill and start paying for the coverage. Whether it be the Ukrainians or the US or another country, we're not entirely sure. Maybe it'll be an entire coalition of NATO countries that pay for it. I'm not really sure, but I do think, in my opinion, that it will have some kind of effect. Also, to address something, because I've seen the chat kind of go a little bit wild with this. The reason why I brought up our experience just a moment ago was to emphasize that there is that at some points, and of course we do draw the line occasionally with viewers that, or bots that come on here and just start spewing stuff and we kick them. We do try and draw the line in between us and the objective of the channel, and the objective of the channel is to help out Ukraine. And so if someone does make a distasteful comment, which I've heard of one or two on other channels, we usually let them go. We're not here to try and cause drama. We're here to try and report the news. That's our objective. It shook me a little bit to hear one comment, because we were trying to get this particular person on as a guest, and so we were like, well, that's, we've done nothing, why in the world say that about us? So we just swept it under the rug, we just ignored it, and we just moved on. And for that reason, I would like to ask that everyone on this channel just takes that story with a grain of salt, and we move on down the road, because at the end of the day, this channel will still run, it will still cover the news, And we're not going to stop, regardless of what anyone tries to do to the channel, what anyone says about the channel. The channel will keep on running. Our objective is to help out Ukraine through fundraisers, also to keep reporting the news to everyone that watches the show around the world, and to make sure that things keep on running as best they can. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next poll if we have one, and if we don't, we'll be moving into the questions.
All right, so we're now moving into our question segment, and up first from our super chats, we have a $50 donation once more from Mark, Slav Ukraine, who says, based on Musk logic, His Majesty King Charles III, the British Empire is annexing Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, etc., and the USA. Immediately on ratification, you will use the metric system and drive on the correct side of the road.
Matty, have you seen that video that someone made of King Charles when he was addressing, I believe it was the House of Lords and Commons in Westminster Hall, and they dubbed it over, and he said, y'all are about to hear some of the tyrannical crap I'm about to do as king. America, we're taking you back. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that, but I can visualize
man.
it pretty good.
It was hilarious. I wish I could show you the video. It had some very strong language in it, but it was very funny. But moving on from that, based on Musk logic, I haven't heard the Musk logic that you're speaking of directly. I'm sure it's out there because I think that's the one that now the Chinese are offering him a tax break on. I mean, I gotta tell you something. If there is a social credit score system out there that's being planned in China, it's not in implementation yet. It's been talked about and joked about for a while, but if there was one, I think Elon Musk just got himself like 90 social credit points for whatever he's just done, considering that they're offering him a tax break now, officially. But still, Musk, I gotta say, is a fairly decent businessman, but he definitely needs to stay out of politics because he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Now he's not really ingratiating himself with anyone, whether it be the entire nation of Taiwan, Ukraine, or the United States, now that a lot of us are seeing that he's kind of just doing things for publicity stunts. Also, one other thing, I did see someone say this earlier. Someone said that they have Asperger's, and Elon may have something similar, so they just say dumb stuff. I also, in case of y'all don't know, say dumb stuff. Now, Asperger's, I don't really know about that, but every once in a while I say dumb stuff. One thing you always have to make sure to do, and one thing I think is sensible, is to have a lot of moderation with what you say. Especially whenever you're talking in an official position. There's a lot of things that Matthew and me could do on stream. We could cuss like sailors. We could say all kinds of outlandish things. We could go into politics. We don't do any of that. It's because moderation is incredibly important in everything, and especially when you're in an official position or talking to loads of people, like I am right now, and you want to make sure that messages get across, because especially when you have a large audience, a lot of things can be misunderstood, and a lot of things can come over poorly, and so you always have to make sure that words are greatly calculated, and you always have to make sure they have the humility that if you do get something wrong, to make sure to immediately reverse it and then just keep moving. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and with that, and of course, I know someone's about to make the argument of free speech. Free speech is a thing. And you can go around and say whatever you want. That is the United States. That's an American thing. But when you're in a position like this, and if you look at, for example, the United Kingdom, the Queen and the royal, well, not the Queen, the King now, and the royal family, they do live in a free country with freedom of speech. And of course, they will kind of get blamed for meddling if they say anything. But one thing you gotta say is that they do have free speech in the United Kingdom, more or less. And they could say whatever they wish, but they don't, because that could start to alienate them from a lot of people, and that's not really their goal. Their goal really is to try and keep the country united as best as possible around their image. You know, people being like, you know, everything could be falling apart, but we can always look at them and have some kind of stability somewhere out there. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And I just saw someone say, "Get back to the news," and we will get back to the news. And so with that, we're now going to be moving into. Wait a minute, hang on, Matthew. Were we in the questions or the news?
Yes, we still have questions to go. But Enforcer, I just want to say really quick, because I've noticed a lot of people saying this comment, and I have to agree somewhat. It seems like when businessmen, especially here in the United States, get really wealthy, it's like they become like know-it-alls in every category. We obviously don't have $1 billion, so I don't know. Maybe you get $1 billion and think that you're like a genius at everything, but the truth is, there's only one thing that made the guy rich. He's in the tech industry. That's his thing. And when you start trying to, become a genius in like politics, international relations, it's like, come on now. It's like, don't be like a know-it-all, because I personally liked Musk before he made the goofy comments, but now that he's making goofy comments, he's like steering out of his lane. It's harder to like the guy now, and it's like, why? He didn't have to. What did he have to gain by going out and making these political statements?
Real quick, actually, I'm sure this will interest many viewers. Let's go over real quick to his Twitter, and I gotta find the one about Taiwan. Hang on. I'm sorry if y'all heard clapping. That's from the Twitter employee. I'm trying to go over here and find the comments he made from Taiwan. See, trying to move on through. Come on.
And also, Enforcer, I know I just dug the rabbit hole a little deeper, but it looks like folks want to get back to the news.
Okay, all right. So we'll keep on moving with the news. And so with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and next up, we have a $30 super chat from Angel Corner, who says, "What's the song playing at the beginning of the countdown at the start of the stream?"
The name of the song at the very beginning of the stream, I believe, is "To the Regiment" or "Banner of the Regiment." It's something or along those lines. I don't think I have the exact translation of the name, but it's been a favorite of mine, and for that reason, it's always stayed in the music lineup ever since. The one in the middle is called "The Cossacks Were Riding," and then the third one, the last one, is the Bayraktar song. And then the song that plays during the really cool intro card is the Anthem of Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that answers what all the songs are, hopefully, and thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And real quick, Matthew, was that our final question, or was that our second question?
So that was our final question of the segment.
All right, and so with that, we finally made it through the question segment and some pretty big rabbit holes, which some people were like, oh my god! And so with that, we're going to be moving back on to the news and covering the remainder of the news we have tonight at a little bit of a faster pace. Starting off in the area near Spernay, we saw that a machine gunner went to sleep. A Russian machine gunner went to sleep. When you see the machine gunner right there, see the bomblet on its way, and bloop, and the machine gun was silenced, meaning that naps were had. I like how that kind of looks like something you would see on like a corporate commercial for some reason, a little skull.
Yes.
And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next clip of news. Once again, there hasn't been any frontline activity in this area around all the way from Solodar to Spernay. Moving further on down to the area of Zaitsev, we actually saw that the Ukrainians were fighting some Kadyrovites. It appears that fighting has picked up in this specific town. When you see here, some kind of a topography layout. Now we can see, let's see, this is the Ukrainians. These three blue dots are the Ukrainians, and these are GBK, Bagnera. So let's see, red. Yes, the red are the Wagnera. Yeah, that's the Wagner group. Okay, so we see a whole bunch of Wagner guys here. Looks like this guy is firing overhead. You see something explode right here. And this is quite a close firefight. They're just yards from each other. Now see a grenade explode in front of one of the Ukrainian soldiers in the trench, but it looks like they're all still in the fight. They've now cut the footage because it didn't get better from there, and they're now showing the Ukrainians in another trench somewhere further down the line. We now see the Ukrainians firing off at the Wagner group still. And now we can see some kind of a replay or something, I'm supposing. And interestingly enough, we haven't seen the Wagner group, according to this footage, take out a single Ukrainian this whole time. In fact, We've actually seen that the Wagner group went from having 5 dots to 4. So now a Wagner group guy has been wiped out, and they still haven't taken out the 3 Ukrainians, although they have a 2-to-1 advantage.
Who made this video?
I have no idea, but they had some pretty decent editing skills to throw in
Yeah,
those
I would
kinds of
say.
animations. I mean, at the end of this video, we could see that the Wagner group came out at the bottom, losing a guy, and the Ukrainians didn't lose a single one. They had as many guys going into the fight as they did leaving it. And then after that, we saw the Wagner group get blown away in another area of the front line somewhere around Zaitsev. So here's the video of that. We can see them walking down the road. Very good formations. Look at that. I mean, like, this is the most disorganized infantry formation ever. We now see the artillery coming in. We're probably about to see that they're picking up speed. Nope, they're not. One guy's decided to crouch. One other guy has decided to take a lie down. Another mortar round hits. Another one. And these guys just got down. A round exploded behind them. And it looks like these guys are also going to be taking a lie down as well. So that's the end of the video, but it doesn't really look like the Wagner group's doing all too well in Zaitsev. Regardless of who's filming this footage, none of it's showing a good picture. And so, as far as we know, once again, there has been no frontline advances in the entirety of the Donetsk area. And so, moving on down all the way to Vesely, we saw a Stugna attack.
Где твоя? У мене. Станцию, говори. Пуск, Шаман.
We see them firing the Stugna in the pitch black of night. Stugna is now on its way. It's still on its way. The tank is still moving. And it's a hit. Yes!
Красавчик, бля. Де ще одна? Дивіться, де ще одна,
Не
пацани.
бачу, де друга. Вона десь в посадку заїхала.
With that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are still knocking out Russian gear and equipment in the middle of the Donetsk Oblast. Moving on down into Rostov-on-Don, I gotta show y'all something that I find funny. In case y'all don't know, the Russians have had the Soviet Union had a lot of military equipment that they stockpiled in the Cold War. I've said that probably about 90 times on stream, but it's something to keep in mind. It seems that they're now starting to pull on this, and they're going old school now, as they're whipping out the 57mm S-60s. So, let me show you an S-60 anti-aircraft gun. Now, you see here that this thing went into service in 1950, just 5 years after the Second World War. But you can even see one of them here in a museum. It looks like it's in a museum in Israel, which it is, actually. And so you can see that these things are quite old. In fact, they're so old that they're museum pieces in most areas of the world. But in Russia, they're frontline fighting material as they've loaded them up onto trucks and they're sending them into Ukraine to be used by the Russian armed forces. And they're packing them in. Now, I wonder how effective those will be. Probably not effective at all. Now, I'm just wondering, are these really going to be effective? APS-60. Anti-aircraft gun. Effective firing range. Optically guided is about 4 kilometers. It has a rate of fire to 105 to 120 rounds per minute. What about the penetration of the round? Does it have any armor-piercing rounds? Single barrel. Let's see here. History. Let's see here. Okay, so let's see here. So an armor-piercing round from a S-60 anti-aircraft gun can get 96 millimeters of penetration on any kind of armor. On a 0-degree angle. So if there's any kind of armor on a tank, that is a little bit elevated, and it's not a BMP, and it's got a little bit of an angling to it, it probably wouldn't go through. So this thing may as well be worthless. And on top of that, you can just pretty much take it out with a nice, easy drone bomblet dropped right on top of the crew. So I don't really think it's going to be too big of an issue. And it shows you how desperate the Russians are for gear, is that they're bringing in 1950 vintage. That, at this point, is a 72-year-old gun to be used in Ukraine. We're now going to be moving further down the front line to the area of Pavlivka, where we saw that the 63rd got into a firefight. Also, they're playing some kind of rock music. You see them firing off a DP-28. We can also see some explosions in the tree line. Now see them enjoying the firefights a little bit more, firing off some RPGs. See the night sky being illuminated by the MLRS rockets. And a nice campfire for the Russians. Also see some armored personnel carriers vying for the turret toss. We can even see some BMDs getting in on the act. Also some Russians. Who said they couldn't be in a turret toss? We now see more APCs competing for the turret toss competition. It looks like a hatch may have gone for the turret toss. We now see some more explosions rocking the trenches. Well, the trench is more like a ditch. We can see some Russians wandering around through the refuse. And it looks like, oh my god, Matty, the Ukrainians got a rod from God that just slammed down into that poor Russian who was already in the destroyed trash pile. And they were like, we can't have anyone left behind. They got him too. Yikes. The Ukrainians with this one, they're out with a vengeance. We see this Russian also trying to climb into the tree line, and then an artillery shell hits him directly as well. I'm wondering how far away that artillery is, considering they're pretty much hitting them on the move. We now see a Ukrainian MI8 firing off its rockets. We now see some more explosions in the tree lines. And I gotta say, the 63rd's doing a pretty good job. So with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are still putting up a good fight. Now, I would show y'all this one, but this one is 15 minutes long, and we are running out of time for the news. So if you want to see this bit of news in its entirety, make sure to click on the link in the description below for the map from day 234, and that should take you directly to this little dot where you can click on it and watch it for yourselves. Moving on over to the area of Staromaisk, I believe I got that correct. Staromayorsk, we saw the 68th Brigade fire off a javelin. Also, we can hear some music. We now see them fire the javelin. It's on its way, and shoo, boom, and they got it. That APC is now burning. With that, we're now going to be moving even further down the front line, where we can then see, in the area of Kharkiv, some drone recon footage. And this is also another 15-minute long video. I sadly won't be able to show this one on stream due to time reasons. The news is starting to go overtime now, but I can show a little bit of it. When you see an artillery barrage coming down, we can also hear some music as a BMP goes roaring by the cameraman. We can see some Russians on the move to their armored super truck looking thing. I forgot the name of it. We now see a helicopter flying low over the fields. I believe that one is Ukrainian. We now see more drone footage. We see it's actually the Terra group. A pretty competent group, I have to say. Now driving down the road, they're now hopping out. And sadly, I'm going to have to end this one right when they enter this little basement. I can't show you all of it because it's going to take way too long to show it all on stream, but make sure to click on the link in the description below and you can check it out there. With that, we're now going to be moving up towards Zaporizhia, where we saw that the Iranian Shaheeds have hit a fuel depot and have caused a fire. The Ukrainians have been facing fuel shortages this entire war, and this may worsen the situation by a little, particularly in Zaporizhia. We hear another one whirring its way in as the Ukrainians try to shoot it down before it makes it to the fuel depots. And we see it explode in the distance over there. We don't know exactly what it hit, but we can see that the fuel silos are on fire.
That sound is haunting, I've got to say.
It is. It sounds kind of like a V1 doodle bug in a way. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the southern front. And while we have had a lot of action compared to normal, it isn't showing any kind of frontline developments at all. And this is one of the areas that we suspect, along with the Donetsk front, will have no developments until the very later stages of the war. Moving on into Kherson, though, we have seen that there has been a little bit of action here. Starting off, we saw that the Russians, quote-unquote, destroyed some Ukrainian forces crossing the Inflict River. We hear some kind of RoboCop music as this missile goes flying in towards an already destroyed bridge with a destroyed vehicle or something on it. And we see them slam this into what appeared to be an SUV. We now see another missile flying in. Once again towards the bridge. We can now see it hit what it looks like an MTLB. We can now see even another missile coming in. And this time, I can't even tell y'all what that is. A recovery vehicle or something? I don't know. They weren't even moving on the bridge, so I highly doubt that. I mean, like, what's kind of odd to me is that they hit one vehicle and the bridge is entirely empty the next shot. But while we're looking at Russian propaganda again, let me show you the real reality of what's happening inside of the Kherson area. From Russian combat footage, nonetheless. So here's the video. Wow. Wow, did you see that, Matthew?
And who are we watching?
These are Russians, and what we're about to watch is them get peppered by shrapnel. Look at all that shrapnel!
Dang.
See, one of them decided to take a nap. This guy, you see that this guy apparently got hit as well. Now this guy's just going to start firing right over this guy's head.
Don't finish him off, comrade.
Comrade, you are wounded. Medical bill's too expensive. Good night. We now see him taking a lie down as well. Now you see this guy just firing wildly as they get up and try and kind of like a crip walk across the open ground. That's the real situation in Kherson. And regardless of how many videos the Russians try and come out with, making it look like they might be winning, that's what's really going on. And there's no way that anyone can say, no, it's not, because look at the amount of gray filled in areas we have that show retaken Ukrainian ground over the past month. There's no way that we can say anymore that the Russians are even hanging on by a thread. And so with that, we've now covered all of the news for the night, and now it's time for us to go north, back to Kyiv, to listen to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 234 of the war. And so without further ado, here is the speech.
Великі народи великої країни. Минає цей день, 14 жовтня, наше свято, свято усіх захисників і захисниць України. Покрова, День козацтва, 233-й день нашої повномасштабної оборони у війні за свободу для України. Я хочу подякувати зараз усім нашим людям, які сьогодні вітали один одного, які вітали зі святом наших військових, усіх наших воїнів. Хочу подякувати тим, хто сьогодні продовжував працювати заради нашої з вами сили. Хочу подякувати усім, хто і цей день, як і багато інших, провів у бою і на варті. На Миколаївщині, Херсонщині, у Запорізькій
Subtitles
області,
are too low,
на
Enforcer.
Дніпропетровщині, на Донбасі, на Харківщині, в Одеській області та у центрі нашої
Is he AFK again?
на півночі,
Enforcer!
на заході і у всіх наших областях, по всьому нашому державному
We'll fix it in just a
Я
moment,
дякую
folks.
всім, хто на варті нашого неба, нашого моря і нашого кіберпростору.
Were you saying something, Matthew?
Yes, these subtitles are way too low.
Oh my God! I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry. I was trying to run off. This is kind of like my halftime right now, so I was trying to run off and go to the restroom actually. So now I'm going to let it play, and I will be back in a little. So I'm going to be AFK for a bit. Just text me, Matthew, if anything goes wrong.
Велика Україна. Минає цей день, 14 жовтня, наше свято, свято усіх захисників і захисниць України. Покрова, День козацтва, 233-й день нашої повномасштабної оборони у війні за свободу для України. Я хочу подякувати зараз усім нашим людям, які сьогодні вітали один одного, які вітали зі святом наших військових, усіх наших воїнів. Хочу подякувати тим, хто сьогодні продовжував працювати заради нашої з вами сили. Хочу подякувати усім, хто і цей день, як і багато інших, провів у бою і на варті. На Миколаївщині, Херсонщині, у Запорізькій області і на Дніпропетровщині, на Донбасі, на Харківщині, в Одеській області та у центрі нашої країни, на півночі, на заході і у всіх наших областях, по всьому нашому державному кордону. Я дякую всім, хто на варті нашого неба, нашого моря і нашого кіберпростору. І окремо дякую всім, хто сьогодні хай тихо, хай мовчки, хай лише у своєму серці, але все ж таки разом з усією нашою державою відзначав День захисників і захисниць України, перебуваючи на тимчасово окупованих територіях чи примусово на території Росії. Україна про усіх пам'ятає, нікого нічого українського не залишимо ворогу, звільнемо все своє, повернемо усе, що належить нам по праву. Ми знаємо з вами, що ми можемо це зробити, і ми маємо це зробити. Так обов'язково буде. Маємо повернути мир і зробимо це. Маємо забезпечити нашій державі історичну перемогу, і це буде. Погляньте, як занепокоєний ворог, послухайте, що і як запитують у керівника цих терористів, коли він все ж таки виходить до людей, до журналістів. Росія вже в атмосфері своєї поразки, вже в атмосфері безнадійності для себе. Так, у них ще є люди, яких вони кидають в атаки, у них є зброя, ракети, є шахеди, які вони застосовують проти України. У них поки що є можливість тероризувати наші міста і усіх європейців, шантажуючи світ, але у них немає шансів і не буде, бо Україна рухається вперед. Сьогодні мав честь вручити хрести бойових заслуг і ордени «Золота зірка» нашим героям. Загалом з нагоди свята державними нагородами відзначені 483 бійця, 15 присвоєно звання Герой України. Відвідав наших поранених воїнів у госпіталі, подякував лікарям, медичним сестричкам за їхню роботу, велику роботу, професійну. Провів ставку Верховного Головнокомандувача. Обговорили ситуацію на передовій, дії ворога і наші кроки для звільнення української території. Плюс постачання боєприпасів, підготовку до зими. Була дуже змістовна ставка. В областях тривають відновлювальні роботи після нещодавньої серії російських терористичних ударів. У більшості регіонів відновлена технічна можливість постачання електрики. Хоча у деяких містах і районах енергетики ще змушені застосовувати графіки стабілізаційних відключень. 15 об'єктів, які російські терористи хотіли знищити, вже відновлені повністю. Відновимо усі інші. Звертаю вашу увагу, шановні українці, будь ласка, все ще потрібно свідомо обмежувати споживання електрики у пікові години, щоб уся енергосистема працювала стабільно. Це також елемент захисту нашої держави. Говорив з другом всієї країни, президентом Литви Гітанасом Наусєдою про наші оборонні потреби, подальшу євроатлантичну інтеграцію, провів нараду щодо стану євроатлантичного руху нашої держави, гарантій безпеки для України, уряд, Верховна Рада, Офіс, всі задіяні. Говорив сьогодні ж зі спадкоємним принцем Саудівської Аравії обговорили наші можливості діяти разом в інтересах наших держав і народів. Вірю, що потрібні результати можливі. Слава усім нашим героям, слава нашому прекрасному народу. Дякую усім, хто захищає і відновлює, хто працює і допомагає, хто воює і перемагає. Слава Україні!
And so with that is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that also rounds out tonight's news segment on day 234 of the war in Ukraine. If you enjoyed tonight's news segment, please make sure to subscribe. It helps out this channel massively, and it helps you to keep apprised of the news. Also, make sure to hit the bell button so that way you don't miss a stream. But it's not hard to miss a stream because this stream runs every single day of the week except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's really impossible to miss a stream because it becomes a part of your daily routine. Just to ask everyone who's been here for a while, a lot of people are always on here every single night. And so with that, I thank you all so much for watching, and we're now about to be moving into the question segment where we're going to address our polls and also all of the super chats that have been sent in and as many live chats as possible. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So for our final segment of questions and polls, we have one more poll to go over. And the question is, taking an educated guess, how do you see the war ending? It looks like 61% said Putin is removed from power, 25% said surrender of Russia's military, 11% said NATO finishes the job, and 3% said surrender of Ukraine's military. Now on this poll, I think we can eliminate one option. Surrender of Ukraine's military is not on the table. I think it's going to likely be that Putin is removed from power. So I would agree with the majority on that. However, I will say that a surrender of Russia's military, to me, seems kind of unlikely because I don't think with Putin in power they're ever going to surrender. I think he'll destroy his country before he ever surrenders. But Forcer, what do you think?
I would have to say, I think Putin will most likely be removed from power at one point or another. I do not see him nor his leadership surviving this war. Wars usually are devastating in Russia whenever one is losing. If we look at throughout modern history in the 20th and 21st centuries, Russia started losing the First World War. Lenin gets shipped over to Russia from Germany. Russian Revolution begins. Tsar is killed. New government forms. The Russians then do not, well, the Soviets at that point, then do not really lose a war for the foreseeable future until Afghanistan. They lose Afghanistan, nation falls apart, reformed into the Russian Federation, Chechen War is lost, Yeltsin gets ousted, Putin comes in his place, and then Putin has survived so far, winning every single war, but this is the one that he is probably going to lose. The writing's on the wall, even in just 8 months at this point. It's unbelievable to think it's been going on for 8 months. He's losing the war, clearly. And so I do not think that he will survive. Historical precedent shows, historically, that if you do not win the war in Russia, you're not in power beyond that point. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well, because I think that's the most viable option I can see it going in. And so with that, on to the next one.
All right, so we're now moving on to our super chat questions. And up first, we have a $50 donation once again from Mark, Slava, Ukraine, who says, have you heard Putin is considering arresting the top military bloggers and hawks, Strelkov, Wargonzo, Yuri Podolyaka, Vladimir Tartarsky, Sergei Martin, Igor Dmitriev, Grayzone, Rybar, Kristina Potupchik for dishonoring the Russian army. He sees that as threat, ?
And I thank you so much for the support, Mark. And I have actually not heard about that. Let's see if I can find anything on that. Putin to arrest war bloggers. Imagine if he arrested almost everyone in Russia, Russian state TV. Well, back in May, they arrested a food blogger. You're eating pizza too badly. To prison with you. But let's see. I can't find anything recently on it in news articles. Maybe it's something wait a minute, hang on. I can't find anything on it, at least on a quick search. And I think if he was, that would be so hard for them to pull off arresting that many of them, because then it makes it look like there is no support anywhere in Russia and the government is just hanging on by a thread, and that's a very bad look. They would probably try and threaten them with arrest and then encourage them to say what they wanted them to say, and then they'd probably do that so that way they could save their skins. So that way it didn't look too bad on the Russian government. But at the same time, I haven't heard about that. I will try and look into that a little bit more and see if I can find something on it. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And I got to thank you and everyone so much for helping this channel to keep alive. We don't run ads, so the super chats are the only way this channel supports itself. And I got to thank each and every one of y'all for throwing this in. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Mark. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $25 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, now that the repair equipment is by the Kerch Bridge, Ukraine should hit it again. In boxing, there's a saying, punch the cut.
And we all know that Mike Tyson believes in that kind of stuff. But Mike Tyson won't be making a trip tonight, because I actually did that impression in college, Matthew, because someone asked for it. And, well, actually, we were just joking around. No one asked for it at that point. I was just trying to rethink that story. They asked for some impression. I did one, and then everyone just started doing impressions. Got to that one, and then they were like, it's okay. I was like, oh man. I was like, man, like every other one was decent except for that one. And so I was like, dang it. I was like, I can't do Mike Tyson anymore until we fix that. Anyways, the repair equipment, from what I do know as well, is near the Crimean Bridge. And wouldn't that suck if it just got hit again? If it just went ploop, and the repair equipment also got destroyed along with whatever is left of the road bridge. I think that would probably be pretty bad. But once again, I don't know if the Ukrainians would do that or not. Maybe that was a one-off thing. Maybe they're trying to not do it a second time so it doesn't look like it was being done by the Ukrainians the first time, and maybe it can be blamed on something else like the truck. I'm not entirely sure, but I do thank you for the support, and I think that would be a pretty good idea to strike it again while the equipment's there, because I'm sure the equipment is fairly difficult to replace or to make. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the comment fairly well.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat from Superbonker 9000, who says, LSA, best bunch of quote-unquote misfits, hands down. Chat question, please.
Best group of misfits? What are you kidding? This is not a group of misfits. This is the group of the greatest people on YouTube. Like, I can't find a single one that's a misfit. Honestly, I can't. Except for the bots. They go. But everyone else, I mean, like, I think y'all are great people. What do you think, Matthew?
I mean, I think so. Like we said the other night, doctors, lawyers, so we have all kinds of people in here. We have, I think, mechanics, tank mechanics, people that have been in the military. We have veterans. I think some older veterans as well that's fought in some of the more historic wars.
Yeah, we do. And I think these are not misfits. I think they're a great group of incredible people. You have some extraordinary people in here. And so for that reason, I will never call any of y'all a misfit. I think we are a great group. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And they're not misfits, but thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. So that way these incredibly nice people can keep on watching the stream, and we can keep on going and covering this news until the very last day of the war. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And Enforcer, we have to go and sponsor that live chat question that Superbonker 9000 put in.
Oh crap! Yeah, yeah.
So Superbonker, we didn't forget about you. So let's see here. Let's see. It looks like the question is going to go to Cromwell, who says, do you think Ukraine eventually could begin to invade Russia mainland after the invasion of the annexed territories is complete?
They could right now. Believe it or not, they could right now. The question is, will they want to do that? The answer is probably no. But hypothetically, they could already do that right now. And if they annexed all the territories in Ukraine and the war was still going, and they were just bent on blood, they could go into Russia and start taking over ground there. Considering that they're really facing no opposition on the front lines right now. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again for your support. And it's a pretty good question. But the answer to it, just a simple one, is they could already. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And why in the world is everyone saying they're a misfit? Like, for some reason, y'all are making me think of the Isle of Misfit Toys from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The old one, the good one, you know, the stop motion one. Speaking of which, the Christmas ads are already here, and we aren't even done with Halloween yet. Is that bizarre or what?
That is bizarre.
It is. I can't stand it anymore. Does everyone else feel like Christmas is starting to take over almost the whole year? Like, Christmas starts in like late September now, and it goes all the way till December, and then you have after effects of Christmas. It's like ground zero holiday wise until Valentine's Day. And I feel like Valentine's Day is almost getting suffocated by Christmas too. Christmas is a December holiday. It's only supposed to be in December. It's not supposed to be in November. That's Thanksgiving. It's not supposed to be in October. That's Halloween. It's not supposed to be beyond Christmas. That is for New Year's, and that's also for Valentine's Day. I don't know why Christmas is taking everything over. It's a great holiday. I love Christmas. My three favorite holidays are the 4th of July for the fireworks, Thanksgiving for the feasts, and Christmas just for the fun atmosphere it has. I love Christmas. But there's a time and a place, and like everything has got to be done in moderation. Christmas is a December holiday. It should just be a December holiday. I'm sorry if I'm getting political here, but December is Christmas. No other month is Christmas. So with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope I addressed that fairly well.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat from Melanie Cortez, who says, another great stream tonight, as always. LSA, you guys are awesome. Slava Ukraine. By the way, got my LSA black sweatshirt today. I love it. Question from the chat, please, and glory to the defenders of Ukraine.
Hey, well, thank you so much for the support, Mel Cortez, and also, I hope you're enjoying that sick hoodie. The hoodies are incredibly nice. I also have one. I have the Lee Spring Army Honey Badger hoodie, and I'm also thinking about probably getting another one soon. So I thank you so much for supporting us both through the super chat and getting our merch, and I hope it's a comfortable one, because I thought it was incredibly comfortable when I wore mine, and so this is a free plug right here. Like, I'm almost trying to sell it to everyone else. But I thank you so much once again for enjoying the sweatshirt and also for supporting this channel and enjoying it so much. Now, before we move on to that live chat, I actually saw Craig Patel say something, and I have to always remind everyone of this, because I don't say it sometimes and it goes under the radar, but Craig Patel said Enforcer was making positive comments a couple of months ago about Ukrainians using the S-60, and you are absolutely right. And to try and make this as short as possible, Ukraine did not advertise themselves as a first-rate military or a global superpower in terms of military strength. Russia did. So when Ukraine uses backwards-looking stuff, it's acceptable because they're a defending country. They're trying to use whatever they can to try and defend the land they have. Russia, on the other hand, painted themselves as a world-class superpower that was up-to-date and could take on the likes of the United States, and then we see them bringing out 1950s vintage AA guns because they have run out of everything else. So that is why it's viewed in a negative light with the Russians and not with the Ukrainians, because there are different scales. Ukraine isn't expected to be a world-class military superpower, and so when they do something like that, it's acceptable. When the Russians do something like that, it's laughable, because they went into this war acting like T-14 Armadas and Su-57s were everything that they had. And so with that, I hope that addresses that real quick. I just wanted to, I know what you're saying, Craig. It does make sense if you're just looking at it on surface, but context right there is very important. That's why I say things in a positive light about things like that for the Ukraine, and not when it's for the Russians. And so with that, I hope that addresses that again. And we are now going to address that live chat question sponsored by Mel Cortez.
All right, and that live chat question goes to Lord Laxi, who says, would the drones be even detectable for less expensive systems?
I think they would be. I don't know how detectable they would be. One has to remember that a DJI Mavic 2 was about the size of a pigeon. Well, even smaller, really, when is more like a pigeon with its wings folded in. But still, it's quite small, and so drones like that probably wouldn't show up on the radar cross-section of any radar, because it would most likely be tuned out as, I guess you could say, actually, that's a really good point. Radars would usually tune that kind of signature out because it's just so small, it doesn't even matter. Other larger ones, though, larger drones like an R-18 would probably show up on any kind of radar, so I guess the answer really depends on what kind of drone is in question, because if it's a smaller one like a Mavic used for reconnaissance, probably not. If it's a larger one like an R-18 that's used to carry bomblets, it certainly would be picked up on even older radar systems, most likely. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And of course, thank you so much, Mel Cortez, for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Edward Curl, who says, sorry, been a while, but still watch, but mostly day after the stream.
Hey, well, that's totally fine, Edward. It's just good to know that you are watching it regardless. Of course, I thank you so much for the support. It helps out the channel greatly. And if you're catching on the next day, that's totally fine. Just make sure to hit the like button. And also, leave a comment. Now, a lot of people don't leave comments, but leaving a comment on the video, in the actual comment section, not in the live chat, does help out this video a lot as well, because it shows that there's a lot of interactivity, people are enjoying it, and therefore, YouTube will send more viewers our way to watch our news, and hopefully let more people know about it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Edward Curl. I'm glad to know you're still around, and I was kind of wondering where you were. Every once in a while, we have viewers disappear from the live chat, and we're like, where'd they go? Like, BC Skyman, I don't think I've seen him for like the past 2 or 3 days, and we're hoping he's okay. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Blue Eyes 58, who says, where are the Bayraktars? I haven't heard of them for quite a while.
The Bayraktars are there. We know that they're still active, but one thing that we don't really know is how much they're used, because apparently the Ukrainians have moved those things up from being symbols of Ukrainian defense into top secret weapons. So we rarely ever get to see Bayraktar footage. They are out there. Apparently they rarely get shot down, because we will see every once in a while that a massive trove of footage will just be released, and we'll get to see what they've been doing. So they are out there. To answer this question the best I can, they are out there. We just don't see a lot of footage of them anymore, because they've now been turned into state secrets pretty much. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Kaltenberg, who says, happy birthday to Enforcer for President. And yes, indeed, and a big yeah!
And also, huge happy birthday to Enforcer for President as well. Of course, it is a huge deal whenever any Lee Spring Army member has a birthday. And it's cool to hear that Enforcer for President, one of our largest channel supporters, and also one of our old guard members in the live chat, and having one of the coolest names out there on this live chat, he is having his birthday today. And so, of course, I thank him so much for enjoying this channel, and also, once again, a huge happy birthday to him. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you for wishing Enforcer for President a happy birthday.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from NorCal Socks, who says, many of the recent videos show wet and muddy conditions. At what point do you think the weather becomes a real obstacle for Ukraine's counteroffensives?
The weather, most likely, will not become a huge obstacle for Ukraine's counteroffensives, because they are using lighter armored personnel carriers for the majority of their operations, or lighter vehicles with somewhat large wheelbases, so it distributes the weight fairly well, and on top of that, it is a somewhat lighter weight vehicle, so it can cross over this muddy ground quite easily. However, for the Russians, that's not the case, because they use a majority armored vehicles like tanks, which are far heavier and sink into the Rasputitsa much easier. Then again, there is a little bit of a caveat. The Rasputitsa, along with the winter, does affect everyone. It's just a question of who gets affected the least. And in this regard, I feel like the Ukrainians, due to their doctrine and how they've implemented their forces in the field, will be affected the least, because they'll be able to deal with the conditions better. Once again, one thing that everyone has to remember, because whenever a question like that is asked, it almost feels like it's a sliding scale in between Ukraine and Russia. And the Russians are always at the same level, but the Ukrainians, depending on the elements, can rise or drop. And one thing that everyone always has to remember, let me whip out the Microsoft Paint real quick. The Microsoft Paint. There we go. The paint. So, have to draw this up real quick. So, this is Russia's little bar over here. This is Ukraine's. So let's say we're talking about the conditions on the front line right now, and this is stable, this is doing worse, and this, anything above that line, is optimal. So we'll put the Ukrainians in blue right here. That's kind of more of a purplish color, but they're about right here. And the Russians, which we'll put in red, are about right here. And so these conditions right now, the Ukrainians have the advantage logistically and through how their forces are operated. They do have the advantage, and it's optimal. The Russians, on the other hand, are not. They're constantly in a state of atrophy, pretty much. And so as the conditions worsen, like in a Rasputitsa, these guys, let me whip out an eraser. The Ukrainians will probably drop down into a condition that is not optimal, but the Russians at the same time, already starting off in an unoptimal position, will just drop down even further into being in a worse optimal position. So while both armies are probably suffering during the Rasputitsa, the Ukrainians still have the upper hand and the advantage over the Russians, and on top of that, you have to add an additional penalty to the Russians, considering that they use an excessive amount of armor. And so that armor is a lot more susceptible to the Rasputitsa than normal. Now, if the Russians, for example, if they had winter gear, now that I'm here and I'm drawing, so might as well just keep drawing, right? But anyways, if the Russians had winter gear and the winter comes around, the Ukrainians would probably still not be in an exactly optimal state at that point. But if the Russians had winter gear and they somewhat got the supply lines together, they could probably be on par, although both of them would still be suffering in a way. So with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. It will probably affect the Ukrainians, but I'm assuming due to their doctrine and how their units operate, it won't be that bad to mitigate the gap in between them already. So with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well with a little bit of an illustration. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat from Josh in NC, who says, "You guys have helped me through a hard time of my life. I lost my mom on February 13th, and I used the war to give me hope after losing such an important person. Ukraine is full of heroes. Thank you to Enforcer and Enforcer Matt." And I've got to say, Enforcer, before you say that, Josh, that is really inspiring to hear. And I'm glad to see that you have found, I guess, sanctuary in the streams. And really, thank you very much for the support, and also thank you for being here.
And I gotta say, I thank you so much for the support as well. And it's great to know that every once in a while we get words and messages like these of people who have been helped through some pretty rough times by the stream running. It means a lot to me to know that we've been able to help out thousands of Ukrainians at home, but we've also been able to help out hundreds of viewers that watch this channel, if not thousands. It's very rarely that we get to hear about them, but I find it a great honor, and I'm highly appreciative that we were able to help you get through a tough time like that. Losing a parent or even a distant relative is a pretty tough thing to go through. And I have to say that it's an absolute honor to think that we were able to help you get through that in one form or another. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Thank you for being a permanent member and a long-time Old Guard member of this Leaf Spring Army. And I'm glad that we were able, as an army, to help you get through what you've been dealing with. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for support, and thank you so much for the kind words as well.
All right, and moving on to our next one, it looks like Psyops, it is your turn to get your super chats in. He's been trolling like crazy
like 8
in
of
the super chats. I think there's like 5 or 6 at this point. So here's the first one. He puts in a $20 donation and says, "Whoa, Matt, that's offensive. I can't believe you just said that. Super wrong."
Matthew, what in the world are you doing?
I don't know.
I'm not the crook. Wait, why that sound like Daniel Day-Lewis in the Gangs of New York?
I don't know.
Like I was trying to do Richard Nixon. I ended up sounding like Daniel Day-Lewis. But with that, I thank you for the support, Psyops, and Matthew. You gotta stop saying stuff like that. Jeez. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to his second one, real quick, let me grab this super chat. There we go. The second one from Psyops says, "Telling someone welcome back. How dare you? How dare you? That's horrible. Woo-ha-ha. Come on, everyone. Overreact to everything Matt says tonight, and Texas stinks."
Matthew!
Psyops, how can you say that, man?
Matthew, what are you doing? Yeah, you're inviting people onto the stream with a welcome back? You're supposed to ignore them. You're like every other streamer. What are you doing? Anyways, I'm just I'm just trying to play along with you, Sios. But thank you so much for the support. And of course, it looks like we are now on a streak. And how many more super chats from Sios do we have left, Matthew?
I'm looking because they're a little out of order in the spreadsheet. Excuse me, in the spreadsheet. But it looks like, let's see, let me count them up real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like about 5.
God, so there was like 8 of them. Also, James May said, "Stop getting off track. I'm sure we like to current war footage."
James May?
James Mays.
Oh, I was about to say James May is like the king of rabbit holes.
And James Mays, whoever's got the name of James Mays, we've already covered the news. Like that happened like 20 minutes ago. If you want to watch the news, like the entirety of the news, just rewind to the beginning of the stream and start there. This is the question segment, pal. Get with it. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Panama Floyd, who says, "Look up the U.S. Pershing missile from the 70s. The Iskander looks very much like it."
Pershing missile. The Pershing missile. Oh, cool, man. Do we have one of these things in Huntsville?
Let me see. Oh yeah, we sure do.
Yeah,
it's up there at the Space Center.
That does look like an Iskander. In fact, that looks just like it. Iskander. So, wow, a double barrel. A double barrel Iskander launcher. And someone's about to say, it's not a double barrel, it's a hydraulic rack or something like that. Anyways, that does look a lot like it, doesn't it, Matthew? It's like a copy. Like, rather than the fins.
It does look like it.
Yeah, the fins aren't identical, but the shape of the body is practically identical. Same curves and everything, and that's starting to come out really badly. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. And what in the world? I think that is at Huntsville. And that is nuts. That looks like it's on a M113 chassis, and they put that entire Pershing missile on it. Oh my god!
That's too big for the vehicle, I would say. Do you think it'll fit? Yeah, it'll fit. Put it on the top.
The M113 driver in this thing just says, "I don't much like the tone of your voice." It just fires the thing off straight in front of the M113.
Yes, the little tracked vehicle that could carrying a missile. It's way too large.
Yeah, that is. Oh wow! Speaking of which, rabbit hole, real quick.
That's very American to do that, by the way. Strap the large missile on the little vehicle.
It is super American. We now have to go to the Redstone Arsenal and check out their displays on the pictures and see if that Pershing missile is here. Because I never got to go outside when we went here when I was a kid. We stayed in the buildings because I think it was raining that day. They got an old Chinook out there. That looks like about a Russian quality Chinook if they were keeping one up for military service. That's about what it would look like these days. Also, they got a huge model of the SLS. I'm still waiting for that thing to launch. Moving on down. Trying to find the pictures of the exhibit outside. Oh, it's a chaparral. Is that cool or what? That's cool. I like that. Moving on.
That's cool. Looks like a harpoon thing that goes on the side of a ship.
Yeah. They also got the yellow submarine that the Beatles were in famously. And I'm just kidding. It's actually an army submarine.
That looks like some kind of narco sub.
The army pops. Hey kids, watch out.
The innocent looking yellow sub that's for narcos.
The Beatles just come popping out of an army sub with M16s. Man, I'm trying
Plot twist: the Beatles were actually narcos.
Oh, I think they were actually. You know.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, we'll cover that at another time.
This is news to me.
I mean, Matthew, didn't you know they were like massively on drugs?
Oh, yeah, but not like drug dealers though.
Well, I'm sure they gave drugs to their friends.
Yeah, but they're not dealers. They're just like a friendly handout, I guess you could say.
Friendly hand. All right. This just in, friendly handouts are a thing. Oh, wait a minute. They got an M270 up there that I never saw.
That's pretty cool. I never saw any of this stuff when we were there.
Yeah, that's because we never were allowed outside, because we were like 10 and 11, and and Mama didn't want to go outside, so we didn't go outside. So, kind of sad. Honestly, I want to go back. A V1 Doodlebug. nuts. I'm going to have to go there again. I can't find the Pershing missile here, but one thing I can tell y'all is that this is a cool museum, and y'all ought to go check it out. Also, are they getting rid of that? No, it looks like they were refurbishing it. Anyways, we are on to the next one, and I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope we were able to address that comment fairly well.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat from Justin Norse, who says evil is a broad, and it takes a lot of good people overcome it. The amount of support I've seen for the greater good from you all is truly inspirational. You all have given me a way to be a part of something bigger than myself.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I'm glad that you have found this to be something that is a goal bigger than all of us, really. We've done things that are just unbelievable at this point, and it's entirely a credit to the Lee Spring Army. Now, one thing I do have to say is that evil just isn't abroad. It's sometimes in our own home. You know, it's in our own homes, in our own nation. It should always be the goal of humanity to always try and find the bad eggs. And, you know, nowadays, a lot of people say that almost half the world is a bunch of bad eggs, but I gotta assure y'all, there's a bunch of kind, nice people all out there across the world. This channel and its viewership is proof of that. I've seen people from all kinds of walks of life, all kinds of different ways of thinking in this channel, from different countries, different viewpoints, and all of y'all have been incredibly kind and nice people. There are very few bad eggs out there, but it's the responsibility of everyone in the world to try and find these bad eggs and to try and quash them, and also to try and help out all the good in the world to keep on going. And so I got to thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that you've been enjoying this channel a whole load, and I'm glad that you've found it a place where the whole lot of us, the whole Lee Spring Army, can push forward to do things that I don't think any other channel on YouTube has been able to do. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Bulletproof. I'm going to reenact this in the way I think it was meant to be said, but I'm not sure really what this means. He said, ah!
What?
He said, ah!
Man, you sounded like that meme where that guy went, ah, and then it just like faded out. Like, that's what it literally sounded like the first time.
I'm not really sure, like, honestly, what that means, but we'll take that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thank you for the support. Yeah, and with that, we're on to the next one. Thank you so much once again. Randy, honestly, you threw me away with that the first time you did it, because it was literally that meme where that guy, like, you know, he got hit in the back and he looked up and he went, ah, and then he disappeared. That's literally what it sounded like. And so with that,
yes,
we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And that can't become a common thing to put in the super chats, because that almost blew my vocal cords out. I'm feeling the pain. But anyways, up next, we have a $20 donation from David Prange, and also a $20 donation from Junebug, who don't leave comments. But thank you very much to both of you. You're both longtime channel viewers, and we appreciate the support very, very much. And Enforcer, would you like to add a few words?
Yes, I would. We are gathered here today to mourn the loss. Anyways, getting past the cheap joke. I thank y'all both so much for the support and helping out this channel. Y'all's support, I hate saying things over and over and over, almost the same way. And I just want you to know, I'm conscious of that. This isn't like a broken record thing for me. I know that. I just can't come up with better ways to say things most of the time. There's very few ways to get the same idea across, but I gotta thank y'all so much for y'all support. Y'all are helping this channel keep running, and y'all didn't throw in a comment, of course, but y'all still showed y'all support to this channel, and you're helping this thing to keep on running. And so I gotta thank y'all both so much. And also, I was thinking about this, speaking about support and helping this channel to keep running. This channel and myself has not really stopped thinking about growing. We're thinking about growing into new kinds of topics, and we're wanting to do that. And I know that some people enjoy rabbit holes, some people don't. It seems that the majority of y'all do. Every time we run a poll, it's like 60% or so of y'all enjoy them. And I'm thinking about maybe making videos on rabbit holes. I don't know if I'd have the time. I've even been thinking about trying to expand this out into where we have multiple different people working for this channel that cover different kinds of stories, and I pretty much just run this main show here about the war in Ukraine, and I go and make sure to supervise that a little bit, make sure that there's no political spins on anything, and the stories are reported as accurately as possible. That's something I have actually been thinking about Once again, it's just an idea. We're probably not moving in that direction anytime soon because I am more than busy enough right now. But still, I think it's would be a neat idea. I would love to see, honestly, Matthew. I would love to see a massive building, like like a large news company here in the U.S. has, with the enforcer on the side of it, and this channel grew into a very large and reputable news organization that was known for being credible for its reporting in every category, regardless of what it was.
We could just crawl up like the stairs in one of the tall skyscrapers and go to the roof and have like a vinyl sign made and just hang it over the side, and there you go.
Yeah,
Just cheat the whole system and just go right to the top.
yeah. I mean, like we could. I think that would. I think that's a pretty good idea. We'll have to go to Atlanta.
That might be a crime, actually, so never mind.
But with that, we are on to the next one. I thank both of y'all once again for the support. And with that, on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 donation from Joe Little, who says, in my opinion, the F-4 Phantom is one of the best-looking conventional fighter bombers ever made.
F-4 Phantom. Phantom. So we can see here the F-4 Phantom. There's a lot of variants of this. This is actually the F-4D? I think this is the F-4D. This one's the F-4E. I honestly like the F-4E a little bit better because it has a very foxy nose looking snout. This one has like a
what? A foxy nose looking snout?
Yeah, a foxy nose looking snout. It's very aerodynamic looking, to say the least about it. The F-4Ds, the Bs, and the Cs, and all the other variants of the F-4s have this kind of large nose cone, and I get it's to fit the radar, but it just looks it doesn't look as good as the F-4E's nose. Also, we can see here, this is a cool one. The F-4 Phantom is still operated by the Greeks. And that is a really cool one because we can see a picture of it here in the camo they use. And it looks cool, honestly. I like it.
So you're telling me that Aristotle was jetting around in this thing?
Yeah,
the Greeks?
The 18th century philosopher Aristotle, Matthew will catch on that joke, I don't think anyone else will, was flying around in this jet. And if y'all don't catch the joke, I'm sorry. I think this is an inside joke with people who used to live in a certain city in Alabama watching a certain mayoral election a few years ago. But one of the mayoral candidates said, the 18th century philosopher Aristotle with a straight face and was not joking. And it was very cringy to watch. So with that, we are moving on to the next. Well, actually, let me address this real quick. This is a really good looking jet. Oh, yeah. But one jet I really like. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm really sorry. But it's Swedish. It's the J-35 Draken, which is really cool looking. Especially the later versions of it. This thing here was made in the 50s. It was the first jet in the world that was produced in numbers to surpass the speed of Mach 2, and they also kind of look like a UFO. I think they're really neat. They're pretty freaking cool. I mean, also, these things were so resilient that these things would get frost on their wings overnight, and the Swedish air crews, the ground crews, would go out there in the morning with crowbars, and they would just whack the ice off of these things, and they would be ready to fly. I mean, like, that's a really good, durable jet right there, if you ever heard of one. A lot of jets couldn't really endure that kind of punishment, because jets are a little bit more fragile than prop planes in terms of their engines, how they work, and all that stuff. But, I mean, like, still, I really like this one. Not for a jet bomber. This is an air superiority fighter entirely. And so for a jet bomber, I would totally have to go with the F-4. It is a really cool looking one. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, stand strong, gents. Y'all are awesome. Keep up the good work. Imagine your own Pootler pun. This question goes to the chat. Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. And we will make sure to sponsor a live chat in your honor. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And Slava Ukraini. And with that, let's hear the live chat.
All right. And this live chat question goes to Sitting and Thinking, who says, will Ukraine try to cross the Dnieper before trying to take Kherson in an encirclement?
Can you reread that one again real quick so I can try and picture that in my head?
This is a tongue twister, so I'm probably going to butcher it again, but will Ukraine try to cross the Dnieper before trying to take Kherson in an encirclement?
one thing I never actually say what I think the Ukrainians do, but I think the answer to that is no. A river crossing would be very difficult for anyone to support at this point. The Russians can hardly support their forces on the northern side of the banks. And so if the Ukrainians try to, they'd be facing the exact same situation. It would be hard for them to supply these units without the supplies being destroyed in the river crossing. And so my go-to answer for that would have to be no. But then again, I can be wrong. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and an actually pretty interesting idea.
All right, and up next, we have another $20 super chat from Psyops, who says, I can't believe you said that about Ukraine, Matt. Zelensky is a hero. Muhahaha.
Matthew, what in the world did you say?
I said Zelensky is a hero, and he can't believe I said it.
What in the world? That's outrageous. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops. And with that, we are on to the next one. Psyops is just trying to brew up some trouble.
Psyops is trying to start some beef somewhere. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Oats Air, who says, Zelensky seems more energetic than before. It must be due to Ukrainian success. So for that, question from chat, Slav Ukraine.
And of course, Slava Ukraini. And also, he did look a little bit more vibrant and lively tonight for about the 10 seconds I saw him before I went running to the restroom. And also, I want to say this real quick. Sorry to everyone, because I actually had Matthew send me a text message saying, don't eat, stop eating. I was starving to death. And so I went and grabbed a pizza, and I was trying to eat a tiny little bite of it, and then the question segment began. So I had a small piece of pizza like stuck in the side pocket of my cheek while I was trying to talk. I'm sorry if anyone heard that. I was hoping that the question thing would go on a little bit longer so I could hurry up and get it out of my mouth and swallow it. But that didn't happen. So I didn't really get to see a lot of Zelensky's speech tonight because I was using it as a halftime to run to the restroom and also try and grab a snack. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. And I would have to agree, in the small amount I saw him, he did look a lot more energetic and lively today than normal. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And also, we have to address that live chat question that Oats Air sponsored, which goes to Cat Nico, who says, do you think logistics in Russia are so bad that they need to use horse-drawn wagons?
Yeah, I mean,
I thought that was a serious question at first. That totally caught me off guard.
Yeah, I honestly think that they could use horse-drawn wagons. I mean, they got... One thing I gotta say, this is one thing I gotta say definitively about the Russians. They can't do anything worth the crap. One thing that they can do fairly well, though, is make music. And I think that they have some pretty good folk music. Like, a horseman, don't rush the coach, and all that stuff. And I think they'll have to start pulling that back out fairly soon, because their logistics are falling that badly apart that they'll start singing those songs again. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
Ian, next up, we have a $20 super chat from Psyops once again, and it looks like we have 5 in a row after this, so hang on tight. He says, Enforcer, you need to really scold Matt tonight. He was terrible. Ha 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 ha. And Psyops, Matt is terrible every other night, so what's new?
Matthew, you need to pick up your job. What are you doing? Wait a minute, Matthew. Wait a minute, hang on. Let's reenact the Samir, you're breaking the car thing. You'll be Samir, I'll be the other guy. Matthew, you gotta stop! You're breaking the live stream!
Shut up, Sammy.
And with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops. And of course, we're trying to keep up the energy. I hope y'all are enjoying this fairly well. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $20 super chat from Psyops, who says, shout out to the Discord crew. Paul and Rambo are my favorite Frenchmen.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I gotta say that whenever I hop on the Discord, it's a fun time. I love talking to all of y'all. It's incredibly interesting. A lot of y'all have got interesting ideas, and also just talk about interesting stuff. Sometimes it's not about the war. And I honestly find those conversations be the funnest, because I get to know a lot about y'all and y'all's interests, and y'all also get to know a decent amount about mine too. And so I gotta say, the whole Discord crew, everyone who hops on the Discord calls, are my favorite. I enjoy y'all a lot, and it's always fun to talk to y'all whenever I get the time, which is very rare. But with that, thank you so much once again, Psyops, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Psyops who says, "Geez, Matt, stop cursing. All that potty talk tonight. Wash your mouth out."
Matthew, if I hear one more thing, I'm kicking you off the call. Yeah, Psyops is on you.
My question is, Psyops, what got you on the streak tonight of trolling? What caused it? Did I do something to make you angry?
Yeah, I mean, what has Matthew done? You've forsaken Matthew. He's like in the out circle now. He's like near the window with Putin, you know? I wonder what he's done. I would actually like to know. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, Saps, and we are on to the next one.
And he's not done. He puts in another $20 super chat and says, "Matt, this is a pro-Ukraine, pro-Oklahoma channel. Any talk about Russia or Texas will not be tolerated."
Matthew, did you talk in a positive light about Texas?
I mean, Texas is a pretty nice place.
That's about to make me go off. I'm just kidding, of course. But one thing I gotta say, I don't know why. I just don't know why. Psyops hates Texas. Now, I understand if you hate Houston, but I don't understand if you hate anywhere else in Texas. I mean, like, I've heard the best things in the world about West Texas. I mean, I've heard that some of them even have teeth. And I'm just kidding, of course. I think Texas is a neat place. I have family that lives in Texas, and they don't have anything to complain about it. They say it's pretty neat. One thing, though, one gripe I have, Matthew, about American cities is why in the world is urban sprawl so bad? Like, you can't get anywhere. Like everyone knows on the stream, we live in Birmingham, Alabama, a metropolitan area with 1.5 million people living in it. And it's impossible to get into downtown when you need to. Every single road is backed up. It's at a dead standstill. And I can only imagine with, Birmingham being the size it is, Matthew, that if we went to a place like Houston with that many highways, and also look how big these highways are.
Enforcer, honestly, I wonder. I would be interested to find out because I have a feeling that Alabama drivers are particularly bad. That's just my take. Alabama drivers don't know how to handle traffic. They get in traffic and all of a sudden like freak out like they've never driven a car before and go swerving across like all the lanes and driving like under the speed limit in the fast lane. Alabama is not equipped for heavy traffic.
No, they're not. But one thing I really got to say is that I cannot stand... Now, this is one thing I will say with definitive certainty. I cannot stand most American towns. You never get out of the car. And on top of that, when you do get out of the car, nothing is in walking distance, ever. It's incredibly annoying, because you can never just get out, because I like to get out and walk around, you know? You can never get out and walk around anywhere, because there's nowhere to get out and walk around. And it's just annoying to me. I really don't like it. When you go to a place like Britain, there's a lot of places you can walk around. You can walk around the whole town because everything's in walking distance of each other. And even then you can hop on like a bus or a train. Although in America you might want to avoid some buses, but still, you can get on a bus or a train or something. You can move around town pretty well, and that's one thing that I would look at Houston. I'm like, yeesh, because it looks like you can't get anywhere without sitting in a car for 3 hours to go like 15 miles. But still, I don't know. Maybe Houston's a nice place. I don't know. I'd have to actually go and see. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Psyops, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $50 super chat from Rob Bertram, who says, "Hey guys, how about a night where you donate 50% of super chats to a Sign My Rocket sponsorship?"
That's an interesting... Well, wait a minute. A sponsorship?
Yes.
Sponsors actually pay us. You don't pay to get sponsorships. Sponsorships pay you to have them as a sponsor. So, an interesting idea. But at the same time, I feel like it would probably be better because here's one thing you got to remember. If you send in a $50 super chat like Bob Bertram is sending, YouTube already is taking 30% of that on top of any sales tax or VAT tax that is attached. So we're only getting 70% of a super chat on YouTube. And so if we took 50% of everyone's super chats, that wouldn't really end up being economical. It'd make a lot more sense for the viewers themselves to go to signmyrocket.com and do that, because then all of it, instead of 30% of it going to YouTube, all of it will go to signmyrocket.com. And so with that, Also, someone said funding weaponry is a YouTube violation, and that is also true as well. So we don't really want to sit there and advertise, hey guys, if you give us money, we're going to put it into, something else, because we don't do that. And
We would never do that.
And we would never do that, and that would not be a good look. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again.
All right, and now that my kneecaps are completely safe, we're going to move on to our next super chat. We have a $20 donation from Psyops, again, who says, for the hard-hitting news, pick Psyops for anchor.
And I think
Now, unfortunately, you know Psyops, like, profile image, just like that smiling face guy that looks kind of a little strange.
Uh-huh.
Can you imagine that guy in a suit
on
the news?
You know what the profile picture looks like? It looks like a little smiling face that's going tee. It's like that.
Yes. It looks. It actually is like perfect for Psyops because it's like that mischief face.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's that little tee face, like you're about to do something crazy. Throw someone down a stairway.
Look, there it is. Eduardo Espinoza put it in.
Yeah, it's that one.
How did you put an image in the chat? How do you do that?
I don't even know. Like that. Honestly, I don't even understand that. But that's pretty nuts. I don't know how you did that. That's really cool. But with that, I would definitely have to say that would be an interesting news anchor for sure. I would watch that if I was me. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, Psyops. I hope that does address it fairly well. We are on to the next one.
And up next, want to give a big shout out to Julie Knorr for putting in a $15 donation, but without a comment. But thank you very much, Julie, for the support, and we do appreciate it very much. Thank you for helping to keep us running. Up next, we have a $10 super chat from Doomsday Games, who says, I misworded my question last night. I meant to say, how would they cross the Dnieper at the southern front, or do you think they would blitzkrieg-style push from the north, considering they hold some land?
I think if the Ukrainians were to do anything, not to get too involved and detailed with it, they would just push across the open ground in the Kherson area instead of trying to cross the river, because it would just be logistically too difficult for them to try and cross the river and then supply a force on that side. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, love y'all's work and dedication to the truth. Slava Ukraine. And this question goes to the chat. So, Blue Flam, thank you very much for the support and the kind words. And this question is sponsored by Blue Flam 777. And it looks like the question is going to go to Hamlet Taco, who says, do you think Ukraine can win without Starlink? Communications are key on the battlefield.
I think that the Ukrainians could win without Starlink communications. They could try and find other ways to communicate rather than through Starlink. But Starlink was a massive help, and so I do feel like it will hinder them, but hopefully not heavily. Hopefully they weren't relying on it so much that it became a bit of a crutch. So with that, I hope I addressed that comment fairly well. And also, thank you so much for the support and also sponsoring a live chat question, because that was very kind of you. Now, real quick, Matthew, I would like to take a quick second to address something I saw in the chat. Jorn Schneider said, take a look at Mons, Germany, over 2,000 years old. And I'm a huge guru for anything old. And Mons, if you're saying it's old and it's in Germany, that's almost unbelievable, considering that almost nothing old in Germany exists anymore. And so if we can, let's see if we can get a street view in Mons. Very few, because Germany's got some very strict privacy laws that even extend out into the public, which is kind of a little aggravating. Anyways, let's drop down here and see what we got. Alright, the privacy laws are pretty serious. You can't see nothing. Let's go up here. Oh, wow! Isn't this a nice place? Guessing so. Looks like Matthew may be running to take a break, so we're going to drop.
Oh no, I'm still here. I'm just trying to get the Discord tab open. My second monitor is completely pooped out on me, so I'm running off my laptop screen only.
Oh, yikes! I didn't know that. Sorry about that. But Matthew, you ever wanted a brand new some brand new Yeezys?
Wow, they have. Is this a store or is this somebody's house?
Oh, this is a store.
Oh.
Oh.
Well, maybe the shopkeeper lives there.
Maybe so. Maybe it's like the
That's
old.
just a joke, by the way.
Oh, I was about to take that seriously, but anyways, let's drop down here. Oh, isn't that cool? They got some neat stuff here in Mons. I like Mons. I think I might try and go here someday. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I thank you for pointing that out, Yorn, and I'm glad that we were able to come out here and check it out. Also, let's see here. What is... Oh, those look like bombardiers and... Any ice trains, though? Don't see ice trains. See another talent that's like a DBR talent 2 or something like that. Really neat. Wow. Got some fine train stations out here, man. Jeez. Like, you could really get into the middle of town with that. Anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next super chat, we have a $10 donation from Justin Nurse. And let's see here. I think Justin sent in several super chats, but he wanted them read in order. So let me see if I can see number one. Here we go. Number one from Justin says, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt and LSA community, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have given me the gift of hope back.
And thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that we've been able to give you hope back. I've always tried to make sure that this channel strives to be I guess you could say, a beacon of hope and also positivity during a time where there can be great despair and also not really a lot of positivity. Wars aren't really known for that kind of thing. But I'm glad that we've been able to keep that up, and I'm glad that you've been enjoying it a lot. That's one thing that I always make sure to carry through on my news. I don't want to make it demure, because then it makes people stressed out and people can't process the news. They'll just block it out. And I want to make sure that if y'all are interested in this, that it doesn't become too overbearing emotionally, where one just feels like they just have to forget about it and hope that nothing bad happens. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right. And Justin, I think I already read off number two, but I don't think it had the number two in front of it. So moving on to his third super chat, which was a $10 donation. He says, you all have given me a way to be a part of something bigger than myself and will continue to hold my position strong even when facing fear, because that is what an LSA soldier does.
Hey, I like that. That is what we do. No matter what, rain, snow, sleet, or shine, whether I'm happy or sad, joyous or angry, these streams have always run, and hopefully that's never really carried over onto the stream where anyone could tell. The Lee Spring Army and the soldiers of the Army are always pushing forward, and we're always making sure to do our best every single day when we're called upon to do it. And every single day for me, it's 10 p.m. Eastern time when I'm called upon to do it. So hopefully I've been able to deliver. That's up to y'all, though. Y'all be the judge on that one. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support, Justin. And I'm glad we've been able to help you and inspire you to be a model LSA soldier. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and his fourth super chat, which is another $10 donation, says, due to amazing people and things I've seen on here, I can say I feel in my American Viking Ukrainian blood, the will of a warrior is still alive. Thank you all for what you have given back to me.
And thank you so much for the support once again, Justin. And I gotta say, I thank you so much for all the kind words that you've sent over these multiple super chats tonight, because it really does mean a lot to us, and it helps us to keep the channel running, of course, through your support. Now, one thing I would like to say is, I actually saw someone say this, Matthew, because everyone was saying LSA, LSA, and then Vertigio, I believe it is, says, this is how cults start. And I was like, I get a really good laugh out of that. It was like, maybe, but it's like, you know, I'm not saying I'm the second coming of Jesus or something like that. I'm not. I'm just covering the war, and I guess people like it a lot. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Justin. And also, this isn't a cult. This is more of an army of good. And I would have to say, I think it's probably the best one out there on YouTube. You know, of course, I'm very biased because I'm kind of at the head of the thing, but I still think I really like the direction this is all heading in. And I think that the LSA having a strong core will help us to survive well beyond the war and help us to keep on growing as a channel. And of course, make a great community and culture out of this, because no other channel I can really think of out there that covers the war or does history or anything has a culture like we do. We've created, like I don't know about you, Matthew, but I feel like we almost have an entire culture, like slang terms that the whole group, like the LSA uses, things that we all say, like little slogans and stuff like that. There are channels out there that do those kinds of things, but we've been able to do it incredibly well, to the point that it is literally a culture.
Wait a minute, Enforcer, I gotta read this one to you. Winnebago said, first, we pay to send him to college, and second, we pay him to start a compound.
Everyone, wait, hang on. Everyone, drink the Kool-Aid. Drink the Kool-Aid. Everyone, get to the pavilion. No, we're not doing that. We're not starting any compounds. We're not doing nothing like that. We're going to cover the news. Hopefully, do incredibly good at it going forward, even into other stuff. We're doing great right now. So, I think that's where we're going. But honestly, man, I love that one. That one was hilarious. First we maybe they go to college, and second a compound. Like, next thing you know, we're gonna have a yacht, and we're also gonna have this big building in Salt Lake City that says the Church of the Enforcer on it. Not like anyone's done that before. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from the House of Wyvern, who says, hello guys, longtime lurker. I'm doing a fundraiser, same charity, with Ukrainian folk metal bands. Enforcer Matt likes rock. Do you mind if I post here when it's ready? Much love from Nottingham, UK.
And I thank you for the support. And I'm not exactly sure, because we do make sure that our golden rule on this channel is that it has to be something that can be done through YouTube Give with an EIN. So I'm not exactly sure, but I will run that around and have some discussions on that, and we will see. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Smart Lucker, who says, you guys need to go to Poland because Matt loves his Poles. Good one. He says, my poor crack at a joke. That's my kind of joke, though. He says, glad you guys keep the LSA involved with making them and don't mind my terrible jokes. Here's to a Poland trip fund.
And thank you so much for the support. And real quick, Matthew, I've always been interested. What does the center of Poland, well, not center of Poland, the center of Warsaw look like? Have you ever been interested in that?
I think I've seen it, actually.
Huh. Quite clean. Except
that is quite nice.
This has got like plywood. But
was that a dog in front of that?
Dog? Yeah, it's a little dog. Oh, look at it.
It's a little dog. It's not even on the. Is it on the leash?
Yeah,
that person's hiding behind the worker.
Yeah, it's on a leash. I think that's the State University of Poland, if I'm correct. It's built almost like the State University of Moscow, I believe. But they built them all the same back then. The Palace of Culture and Science. The communists really knew how to build a rip-off Art Deco building, didn't they? But anyways, let's go drop down in another place, like down here. Let's go look here. Honestly, well, this building does look a little rough, but honestly, not a bad-looking city. Looks quite interesting, really. I think I might go check it out. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and so much for an interesting idea. A trip to Poland would be pretty interesting. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support and the kind words as well.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Robert McIver, who says, yeehaw.
Yeehaw! And thank you so much for the support, and I hope we were able to address that comment fairly well with the yeehawing and all that stuff. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Dwayne Porter, who says, you guys don't know anything about traffic, LOL. I grew up in New York, a city with 22 million in an area half the size of Birmingham, LOL.
Now, that is actually a pretty good point. New York City is the metropolitan area of the United States. It's the biggest one out there. And also, Matthew, would you like to share the story of the video you watched today about the pizza review man? Because that was actually a really funny story, and I think a lot of people here would love to hear it.
Yes, if you go on YouTube and look at, I think it's Dave Portnoy. He's like the guy that does Barstool Sports. He does like pizza reviews. And he had like one particular one where he walked outside to review the pizza, and there was like some guy lurking around outside that had like blood running down his face. He walked by and was trying to heckle him. There was some lady sitting on the sidewalk that was trying to yell at him and heckle him. And then some World War II veteran walked over and was like, I fought for your freedom, man. You better be grateful. He's like, okay, thank you, guy. But it's really funny. I think a lot of people have probably seen it, but if you haven't, pull it up.
And sadly, that's the more condensed version. Matthew told it today in a way that was really funny, actually, because he like threw in all the stuff like, "Hey, shut the hell up! I'm over here trying to review a pizza," and it was like funny as skunk, But y'all should go check out that video. It sounds like a funny one, and of course, New York City sounds like an interesting place. I've never been, and I gotta be honest with you, I hate built-up areas a lot. Like, I'm fine with going into them for a little bit. I cannot stand the concept of living in a place that is solid concrete. Like here. Like, let me drop y'all down in here. Also, I'm sorry, that's the Long Island Railway. Let me move over here. Like this forever? I don't know if I can mentally handle it, because it seems like it's nearly impossible to get out of this place. Like, look at that. It's just nothing but solid concrete. Like, the whole island's concrete. Especially Manhattan. Manhattan is crazy to look at. Also, let me drop down here. Oh, yikes. Wow. What's going on here? Some renovation work or something. But, yeah, I mean, New York is an interesting place. Whether I could live here is another thing. I'd actually have to go there and see. I've never been to New York. I've been all the way over to the United Kingdom. I have never been to New York City. I'll have to go see it for myself one day. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And I think you are probably the #1 guy to talk to about traffic. If anyone would know about it, it would be you. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Suzanne B, who says, how big of an area around Belgorod would the outage probably affect?
Same area of an outage. In Belgorod?
Correct.
Sadly, I don't think we would know about the electrical grid in Belgorod and what that substation was connected to, but I have a feeling it was a substantial part of the city at least. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Angry Pickle 187, who says, check out the YouTube channel Defense Web TV and look at the recent AUSA 2022 Defense Exhibition. We may have an Abrams with an autoloader in the future.
And I thank you for the support. And we've actually already checked out the Abrams X on channel before, and it was a really cool looking tank, I gotta say. And it seems interesting, although I'm not sure if the Army would go with it or not. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Mary W, who says, Putin's men are torturing children, but Elon is all for it. Now, Mary, I have to say that while Elon's comments were distasteful, I think that's taking it a little too far. Elon has definitely not called for torture, nor does he support it. So I would have to disagree strongly with that.
And I would have to kind of agree with Matthew on that one, because there's that one thing, of course, that I've said tonight is that there should always be moderation. And just because we disagree with one thing doesn't mean that they become an evil, child-eating, like freak. Because a lot of people, believe it or not, don't really like this channel that are pro-Russian. And I've gotten people who threaten to kill me, and also a lot of people who sit there and say, because, they just disagree with me, really, that I'm some kind of George Soros, UN-paid, NATO-paid propagandist earpiece that does what they say, and I get paid by them to say it. Which isn't true either, and they just go to these massive, crazy links because they just don't really like what I say, and I always want to make sure to remind everyone of that and keep things like that in moderation, and also really cut that out, because while we disagree with him, that doesn't make him the most evil person on earth. That doesn't make him, as people say as a joke, literally Hitler. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, a big shout out to Paul Fitzgerald for putting in a $5 super chat, but without a comment. And thank you very much, Paul, for the support. Up next, we have a $5 donation from Sausage Gravy Biscuit, who says, from an old crow, NEEW analysis, much respect.
And I thank you for the support. Sadly, I don't think we can do any electronic warfare analysis at this point. It would probably be a massive rabbit hole that we sadly don't have a lot of time for right now, but that may be something we'll try and address later on in the future. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, Matthew, I saw this this guy here like Alti 38. Y'all really have no clue what you're talking about. Well,
That's just a bot.
yeah. Well, I was looking at that. Now I was thinking of a good comeback. I probably won't say it here, but I was like, oh man, there's a great comeback to that one. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Little Jam, who says, "I'm back on this username. Question for you two. Putin said today mobilization will end in 2 weeks. Do you believe it actually will?"
I believe it probably will, because once again, if they don't, that'll be another promise broken to the Russian public, and that gets them one step closer to outright dissent. I think they'll most likely try and end it and then revigorate it in weeks or months' time. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Julie Nor, who says, "In Norway, we are worried that Russia will attack our oil and gas platforms. Would that be enough to use the Article 5 of NATO?"
Yes, it would be, because oil rigs are probably considered land or vessels of a NATO country, specifically in this case Norway, and so attacking them would invoke Article 5. In fact, I think Article 5 has a special provision in it for oil rigs and other kind of offshore platforms that are owned by a parent nation in NATO. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and I thank you so much for the support. And have no fear, if the Norwegians are attacked, I think that would be enough to get everyone involved, because they're a NATO member through and through. They have been for an incredibly long time. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Nigel Curtis, who says, "Can you two swap roles for a night? That would be fun." Nigel, we would, but guess what? Enforcer is the walking encyclopedia, and I am not when it comes to military equipment. So I'd be like, yeah, look at that tank over there. That looks pretty cool. Oh yeah, look at that. It looks like a jetpack. And I'd be just saying a bunch of bullcrap basically, because I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to the specific equipment. So sadly, we couldn't swap roles for a night.
And one thing that's interesting about that is, oddly enough, on the surface, it may look like our roles are interchangeable, but interestingly enough, they're not interchangeable at all. Matthew and me do totally different things during the stream. On y'all's end, it looks like we're doing the same thing, but I'm doing one thing and he's doing the complete other, and we have a little bit of intersection in the middle, which makes it look interchangeable. But I probably couldn't do Matthew's job, and Matthew probably couldn't do my job either. I don't know the exact process that Matthew has streamlined over the past 170 days to do the super chats and all of that as effectively as he does, so I would be at a massive disadvantage. And Matthew, like you said, probably, and of course this is nothing disparaging, because who in the world knows the difference in between a T-72B and a T-72B3? But he probably wouldn't know those kinds of differences. I'm guessing not, Matthew.
No,
Okay.
definitely not.
And probably wouldn't know a lot of historical context, because Matthew and me have very different, I guess you could say, like, interests, and his interests never really coincided with the military or history. His was more economics and politics, which is kind of interesting because we don't talk about politics on the stream. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Jake Brooks, who says, "Excellent shows, WDE."
Hey, well, thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy these shows. I'm glad that you're here and you're enjoying them and helping us to keep them running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from the House of Wyvern, once again, who says, "My apologies for the confusion. In regards to the Ukrainian folk metal fundraiser, it will be a YouTube video in the same method that you do."
Interesting. If it's through the YouTube Give platform and an EIN, probably could support it. If otherwise, I would have to do a lot of discussions about it, just to make sure, because we've never done anything outside of the YouTube Give platform or promoted anything outside of the YouTube Give platform. So it would be a little bit of a break from our norm to do that. But I do thank you for the support, and we will think about it. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $5 super chat from Julie Nor, who says, "Keep up the good work. Fun story yesterday. A Russian quote-unquote tourist tried to cross the border back to Russia and was arrested. In the car, they found 3 passports, 3 drones, and lots of encrypted pictures."
Interesting. I would have to look into that story a little bit more, but it sounds interesting. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And up next, shout out to Dubsy Dabster for putting in that $2 donation. We do appreciate it very much, Dubsy, and thank you so much for the support once again. We have a $2 donation from Robert Rodriguez, who says a pretty missile would be a Hercules.
Hercules, Hercules. Let's pull it up.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, Hercules missile. Oh, that's a neat one. I think that one is at Redstone Arsenal. Wow, would you look at that? That is a neat looking missile.
That is pretty cool. It looks like a space shuttle.
Yeah, especially from this one here. This thing looks like some kind of...
That doesn't look like space shuttle.
No, it doesn't look like a space shuttle there. And also, that's a really grainy picture. It looked a lot better when we didn't click on it. That one's... Is that camo painted onto it? Anyways, I'm trying to find good pictures of it. Oh, look at that. It's a... Are these... Okay, this is funny to me. This is clearly an F-100, which is a U.S. designed aircraft in the early part of the Cold War, and they painted red stars onto it in this picture, and they have a U.S. Hercules missile slamming into it. Not really the kind of picture you'd want to paint, because that's obviously an F-100, but I digress. So with that, I thank you for the support and also letting us take a quick look at this Hercules, Hercules. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel keep running and also letting us know about this neat missile.
All right, and our final super chat of the night until we move on to our live chat questions is from Madison Music Teacher, who puts in a $2 donation and says there's a War Games alternate ending on YouTube.
And I thank you for the support, and I will try and go and look into that. I haven't seen the War Games movie yet, but we are trying to get there with it. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And considering that we've run a little late tonight due to the super chats and the news, we are only going to be answering 7 live chats. I'm very sorry once again, everyone, but we want to make sure to get to sleep on time because I have a midterm to knock out tomorrow on the internet. And so with that, we are on to the first one of the night.
All right, and the first one of the night goes to Mark Hodges, who figured out the Morse code tonight. He was the only one to do so, so Mark is very dedicated. He said Russians are running out of missiles just like their tampons. Slava Ukraine.
And you did get it correct. And they are running out of missiles just like they're running out of tampons. You can only have so many of those things until you can't plug a bullet hole or a shrapnel wound anymore. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for this, for deciphering that Morse code message. Where are the other deciphers? Where are they? We're running out of them. And so with that, we're on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for sticking with us every single night so far, Mark.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Aaron Walters, who says, do you think the U.S. should threaten other countries that send weapons to the Russians and say they will have consequences?
We should. We should make sure that people fear to support Russia, considering that it's not really in our interest for them to do that. But then again, you know, it would be a little bit hypocritical considering we are supporting Ukraine for us to say that people can't support Russia. But at the same time, the world isn't a fair place. And while we can support Ukraine, we need to try and stomp the heads in of others who try and support Russia, so that way they don't do it. I'm sorry, I know that kind of sounds a little bit weird and also not really fair, but when you're trying to play the game of geopolitics, the world isn't really supposed to be a fair place. It's supposed to be lopsided towards what you need, not what others need. And so we got to make sure to protect our sphere of interest while, I guess you could say, sabotaging others. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from the squad guy, who says, have you guys seen Steven Seagal's birthday message to Putin was a little wee bit... Wait a minute. He meant to say, was a little bit ill from watching it.
I have not seen it. I will have to go and check that out. But I have a feeling, having seen some reviews on Steven Seagal's movies, that it was pretty bad, to say the least. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And next up, we have a question from Steve G, who says, how many POWs have the Ukrainians taken? Why no video of large groups of Russian POWs or POW camps?
I don't know why we haven't seen large videos of POW camps, but one thing we have seen is that there has been a decent amount of POWs taken. We don't have an exact number. We've never been able to get an exact number, but I'd have a feeling it's in the hundreds or the thousands at this point, although I'm not entirely certain. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. Once again, I don't really have a lot of information to work off of, so this is kind of me declaring ignorance. But then again, I thank you so much once again for the question, but sadly, I don't really think I can answer it with a lot of confidence due to a lack of information. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a question from Henry M., who says, did you hear that Russia put some nuclear bombers on the border of Norway and Russia?
Some bombers of, well, I wouldn't really consider that out of the norm. They do border each other up here in the north. They probably did. It's probably nothing to worry about, considering that there are Russian bombers that fly very close to U.S. airspace near Alaska and in the Arctic Circle. So I would have to say it's probably nothing to be concerned about, but unfortunately, I haven't heard of it. I hate this, man. You're asking me so many questions that I don't really have the answer to. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Book Bandit, who says, when this is over, do you feel that there will be a DMZ along the border like we see in Korea?
Probably not, because this border is incredibly long. It's so long, it probably could never be covered properly doing something like that. I have a feeling that it will most likely be, if anything, close. I'm trying to think of a border like that. It would probably be close to the border between... I can't really think of a comparable example, honestly. But it will be a little bit more militarized than normal. But it won't be like the Koreas, because the Koreas are an extreme example. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the last 3 questions of the night.
All right, and next up we have a question from Eric Pace, who says, Russia has called for the evacuation of civilians in the Kherson region to Russia. While this war has been fascinating to watch tactically, what about this mass kidnapping?
I don't really know what to make of it. I don't know where they're heading, and I don't know why they're being moved out, but it is interesting to hear about nonetheless. We haven't got any video or picture evidence of it at all, but we will be trying to look into that a little bit more. I don't really know what kind of historical context we could take from it, unless if it's some kind of a, well, I mean, like, the closest thing to it would be like moving the Jews out of their homes and into the ghettos in Germany, and other occupied areas in the Second World War. So beyond that, I don't really know what it could entail, but if going off of that example that I just listed, it could be incredibly terrible things. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Paul Benz, who says, would it be a good tactic at this time for Ukraine army to create another front to split the Russians yet again? Their supply lines must be very strained, so another front, ...
It seems like an interesting idea, but another front would mean pushing into Russia and not recapturing objectives with the resources they have at hand inside of Ukraine. That could be a massive disadvantage to the Ukrainians, because the Russians could try and pull some of their units, if there are any intact that are left, to try and defend that area of the country, and then they could also start to invoke the idea that nukes should be used, and then how could you really blame the Russians for using nukes, considering they would probably be used on their own land at that point? That's something of a good question. But I don't think it would be to Ukraine's advantage. I think it'd be much better for them to conserve their resources and efforts to inside of Ukraine alone and try and retake the territory that they have owned since the beginning of time, pretty much. And so with that, I hope that addresses that comment fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is going to be Kel SCO, who says, Enforcer, I'm going to triple down on my concern for the Novakovka Dam. Once the Russians withdraw, please comment. Thank you, and sorry, no money to donate.
It's fine. You don't have to support every night. We aren't going to sit there and be like, come on, where's the money? You know, like, we're not going to be like that. But I do thank you so much for the nights you have supported us. And also, I thank everyone who does support us and just hits the like button, stuff like that. It helps us out a lot. But to answer that question, once the Russians retreat, I just got to be honest, I don't think they're going to hit that dam. There's no way you can excuse that. There's no way that's an accident. You'd have to deliberately aim for the dam to hit it and rupture it. And then you would be killing tens of thousands of people further down the river. So it wouldn't really be a good look at all for the Russians. At least the Russians can try and excuse missile attacks they're currently conducting as, oh, it was supposed to go for a military target and it missed. But with that right there's no way you can excuse that. That would just clearly be a crime against humanity, to say the least. So with that, I still think they would probably not hit it, but once again, I'm not entirely sure. You know, the Russians are nuts. We've seen them commit atrocities before. They could certainly commit atrocities of that scale as well. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to cover the past 24 hours of news with all of y'all, to hear y'all's questions, and to also see what y'all had said in the live chat. It was very interesting tonight for sure. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again. It's been an absolute pleasure once again to cover it. And if y'all did enjoy, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, because it helps us to run these streams every single day. And if you hit the bell button, you will not miss a single stream, because the streams run every single day except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, where we cover the past 24 hours. And so with that, thank you all once again, and I will see you all tomorrow to report on the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine on day 235. Have a great night, take care, stay safe, and Slava Ukraini!